So it reminds
Testing,
me, I do
testing.
need to be a little more thoughtful about trying to talk in the microphone. Because we're relying on that as our historical record now, and
Testing, testing.
we're feeding. Yeah. You know, and I didn't think the majority of the people, residents, there was a whole group of food truck people there. Somehow they found out a meeting. At least 6 of the guys were food truck guys. And absolutely. And, you know, one of my big complaints is Dennis Norton got up and spoke. Right. And, but he had information that none of us had. And that is that they're not going to allow people to launch private boats from the wharf anymore. So that completely changes how I feel about vehicles on the wharf and what should be on the wharf. As it used to be, we were required to let them do that. Yeah, so right. You had to have cars out there. I think it's important that if you ask people to give input, they need to have good, solid information to base that input on, not just pie in the sky ideas. I mean, I think it was a waste of time because none of us knew what we were really talking about. How do you feel about it? I thought that we did. It used to be a requirement from the Wildlife Conservancy, which gave the big chunk of money in '83 when the wharf was redone. But I mean, someone could have contacted them and gotten that changed. I mean, it's possible to change those things. So, you know, maybe that didn't happen. But if that's true, then that's something that, you know, the public needs to know. Yeah, yeah. No, I was a little, you know, and I think that most of those meetings where you have people put stickers up on the wall are.
You don't like stickers?
I don't. I think they're. I know.
Katie loves stickers.
I just want to know when I'm voting. Don't ask me. Don't tell me half and then ask my opinion.
I wasn't at the meeting, but I watched it last night on YouTube. And yeah,
It was completely confusing too about you had 3 colored stickers and what the sticker was supposed to be, and everyone kept saying to me, "You know how you're supposed to do this?" And I'm like, "You know." They tried, but it's just one of those ones.
RTC had a meeting in here earlier. I think we should do just a quick check of mics because.
Test.
Hello?
hello. Test.
Yes. Test. Check.
I did that.
Test.
Check, check.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna get an agenda because I didn't check one out myself. I usually do. Forgot my glasses.
Would love it. Extra.
I got one. Yes. So, do you want us to try and move this one above the San Jose Avenue one? So,
Well, I have to recuse myself from the Fanmar one and yeah, if you would do the San Jose one, then I like to just walk out.
okay, are you ready? Yep. What's that? Move the other one. Oh, yes, yes, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Okay. All right.
Hello? Hi. Hello and welcome to the Capitola Planning Commission meeting. This meeting is open to the public with both in-person attendance at City of Capitola Council Chambers at 420 Capitola Avenue and remote attendance as possible. Planning Commission and staff are attending in person and remotely via Zoom. There are several ways for the public to watch and participate. Information on how to join the meeting via Zoom and make public comment during the meeting is available on our website, cityofcapitola.org, on the meeting agenda. The public can also live stream the meeting on the city's website or on YouTube. As always, this meeting is cablecast live on Spectrum Communications Cable TV Channel 8 and is being recorded to be rebroadcast on the following Mondays at 1 p.m. on Spectrum Channel 71 and Spectrum Channel 25. A recording of the meeting will also be available on the city's website after the meeting. Our technician tonight is Quinn, and as a reminder, please turn off your cell phones during the meeting. Thank you. Okay, on to item 1 is roll call.
Commissioner Estee,
Here.
Commissioner Westman,
Here.
Commissioner Wilk,
Here.
Vice Chair Jensen,
Here.
and Chair Christensen.
Here. And then Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. To the republic that stands one nation.
Great. Item 2, additions and deletions to the agenda. Item A is additional materials. Item 6B, correspondence received.
Yes, staff received one additional material for item 6B. This was a applicant letter. It's been added to the agenda packet and provided in the back of the room.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wilk has to recuse himself from the last item on the agenda. So I was wondering if we wanted to reorder and do the citywide zoning one first and then do the San Jose Avenue one second. So,
San Jose Avenue is the one I have to recuse myself.
right. So we want to do that one at the end. And
Okay.
If we were to do that, I would suggest that we bump the discussion on the Architectural and Design Review Committee first in that zoning code update, because there's quite a few local architects and designers that'll be in the room tonight that possibly could provide feedback.
I mean, is that
do we need to make a motion or anything to make that change? I don't. I think you can just reorder the
Yeah.
agenda.
so? We're gonna do San Jose, item B, public hearing.
As C.
Item
B will become C and C will become B.
C will become B.
So 602 El Salto will be A.
Okay.
Huh?
Citywide zoning code update will be B, and 115 San Jose will be C.
Perfect.
Okay.
And then we're also moving the Arkansas site to,
That will, when we get to the citywide zoning,
okay.
we'll bump that first.
Do you have any interesting tidbits in the director's report that I would miss if I left early?
During staff communication, I'll do some updates.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to item 3, oral communications. Oral communications allows time for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on any consent item on tonight's agenda or any topic within the jurisdiction of the city that is not on the public hearing section of the agenda. Members of the public may speak up to 3 minutes unless otherwise specified by the chair. Individuals may not speak for more than once during oral communications. All speakers must address the entire legislative body and will not be permitted to engage in dialogue. A maximum of 30 minutes is set aside for oral communication. Nope, seeing none on Zoom. Okay, moving on. Item 4 is Planning Commission and staff comment.
Okay, I just wanted to bring you up to date on 2 items. So our housing element was resubmitted on Tuesday to the state. We're hoping to get a meeting here in the next week or so with the state representative. They have some time to look at our edits. The only comments we received while it was open for the required 7-day period was from YIMBY, and they were more questions than comments on the update. So that's good news. We're going to make one modification to an error on the map, which pointed out the wrong location for 602 Bay Avenue or 650 Bay Avenue. 750 Bay Avenue. So we'll be correcting that on the map. And I'll be bringing that back to you once I've had an update, chance to talk with HCD and have more information on where we're headed with that. So that's the update on the housing element for tonight. And the second update is really on the wharf. And we finished up the wharf survey and we had over 1,000 responses, which was fantastic. And then this week on Tuesday night, we had a follow-up meeting with the public on the wharf and got more feedback. Just a lot of new ideas came in through the survey. So we just asked more questions about those new ideas and concerns that came in. We'll have a staff report published tomorrow by 5 p.m. on a temporary wharf plan. So look out for that. That'll go to the city council next week, and it'll take into consideration everything we've heard up to date. At the same time, we'll also have a long-term wharf, just getting authorization from the city council to move forward with a request for proposals, looking for an architecture or planning firm to start looking at different options for what could be the long-term planning on the wharf. So those 2 items will go to city council next week. We're actively moving into budget season at city council as well. And during that, and when we look at the CIP projects, I will definitely be mentioning the concerns of Planning Commission near some of our higher density projects that have come in and looking at roads to make sure that gets on our capital improvements plan. So in the next 5 years. Okay, so those are my updates tonight and my director's report combined. So thank you.
One question about the housing element. We significantly expanded the mall, number of dwelling units, et cetera, at the mall. Is the ECD aware that we're doing that at this point, or did you have any discussions with?
Yes, so before submitting this and before making all of the revisions, we did talk with our planner at HCD and let them know what we were planning on doing, and they were happy with the efforts there. So, as well as the height.
I figured they'd be happy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there something else just follow up on with regarding the wharf? Just as a public notification, the mosaic artwork part where the wharf is ongoing now. And so it's at the Capitola Mall next to Ulta, and it's open. Let's see, the hours are Monday, Thursday from 3 to 7 o'clock, I think, at night, and it's open from 10 to 2 on Saturdays. And so it's all been designed out, which I think everybody has seen, but we're encouraging everybody to attend or of the public come out and just be a part of the process and everything. So it's great to see it. I stopped by there, saw it the other day. It looks great. So just want to make sure we shared that.
So I just have one follow-up question on the wharf. So at the meeting on Tuesday night, one of the speakers indicated that the wharf is no longer going to be launching private boats. And I wondered if you could follow up on that and let us know if that's accurate or not.
Yes, so I think that's going to be subject to the lease agreement, which is not in place yet. The previous lease definitely allowed private boats, so I will follow up on that, but if,
My recollection was the reason the private boats were allowed was because of the grant that the city received from the Wildlife Conservation District. And part of the requirements in that grant to make us eligible to qualify for it was that there would be the launching of private boats. So I would just like to know how that's playing out.
okay.
Anything else? No? We're moving on to item 5 with the consent calendar, and all matters listed under the consent calendar are considered by the Planning Commission to be routine and will be enacted in one motion in the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion on these items prior to the time the Planning Commission votes on the action unless the Planning Commission requests specific items to be discussed for separate review. Items pulled for separate discussion will be considered in the order listed on the agenda. Item A is approval of April 4th, 2024 special planning commission meeting minutes.
I would like to pull both those items. Is that
Okay.
okay?
Okay.
And
So do we need to separate them?
Yeah, he's pulling them anyway.
Yeah, I wanted to pull both of them with that for discussion.
So pulling item A and item B, meeting minutes and 210 Fanmar Way.
So do we want to do item A first?
Yes, because I have to recuse myself from B. So let's do A and then I will.
Run
Run away.
Just regarding item 5A, on that one regarding the 1098, on page 16, the comments weren't exactly clear how I remember them being reflected. One of the sentence says, that the staff will be directed to communicate with city council and around surrounding streets being relieved of additional parking burdens. And I thought there was a little bit more direction around that, that we wanted it to go back to city council and have it reviewed as an item. And I personally didn't think it reflected 100% of what the full intent behind that was during the meeting. So I was wondering if that can be expanded upon, or maybe we go back to what the,
I think we wanted it to go to the city council so they could at least talk about that when they're discussing their budget, because doing any kind of street improvements in these areas around the project definitely will require money and, time. So just to have staff put that on some list so it gets to the council is something we would like to see them consider.
so I put together a slide because the sequencing was also off on this April 4th meeting. So it was, usually we have the commissioner, the presentation, questions, public hearing and discussion, and then that followed by the motion and then the findings and conditions. So that I thought should be modified. And I, at the very end, I did put in some new language because I think it was a request to consider in future road improvement projects to mitigate on-street parking impacts. So to communicate to the city council a request that the surrounding streets be considered in future road improvement projects to mitigate on-street parking impacts. Does that cover it? And that was my plan, is just coordinating with Jessica that this, again, similar to the Avenues project, be listed as a future capital improvement project.
yeah, that's how I remember it. If everybody else was fine with that, that's how I remember it.
Thanks for bringing it up. I didn't catch that. So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for this special meeting on April 4th.
I still had questions on B.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Go
So
ahead.
do you want to do A for, just vote for both? Or just my comment on B.
Doing A first because I can't listen to your B comments.
Okay, sorry.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting of April 4th.
All right, I'll second,
As amended with the staff slide.
second that.
Roll call?
Commissioner Esty,
Aye.
Commissioner Westman,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilk,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jensen,
Aye.
and Chair Christensen.
Aye.
Well, Jerry, would you like a full staff presentation on this or just?
Oh,
have
so
a few-
just item B, you have to recuse yourself of the 41st Avenue one?
The Fanmar one.
I'm talking on the consent agenda item. Item B is
Consent calendar.
on the consent counter.
So he needs
Fanmar.
to leave.
Yes, you need to leave.
I'm sorry, I'm still talking about the meeting minutes.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
wait, the meeting? We just,
Oh, I thought you were talking about,
Well,
Sorry.
So that last comment that we were just picked up was correction in the meeting minutes from the last meeting, correct?
Mhm.
And then item B is 275 on the 41st Avenue Suite A.
oh, okay.
Sorry.
Am I confused?
No,
guess
I was confused. I blame it on me.
I think there was two items on there was item A that we just talked about, and item B was at 2175.
Huh?
Okay. Sorry, it's just regarding the, my comment was, we separated those two. There was it was dual applicant, I think, it was about the sign and then the relocation. I just also thought, my follow-up on that was just when there seemed like there was a lot of conversation that we had regarding the sign and the height, and I don't know, we didn't issue any direction, but a lot of comments. I just wanted to make sure that since it was separated, it was noted here that the sign application be reviewed under a separate application. Are you guys working with that applicant then? And they've been, I don't know if it was the applicant, I mean, I know the applicant was here, but the person involved in the application for the sign, are they going to get all our comments and you'll be working with them from the staff level on making those changes or recommendations for that to come back to us? Is that? And just nothing was reflected in here that we talked about the sign and per se. It was just said that it's going to be reviewed under a separate application. I just want to make sure our comments that we all shared that night was communicated to them. So when it comes back, those were picked up.
So we have met with that applicant and discussed the overall need to make a master sign program really work with the 4 tenants and the height concerns and overall square footage of the monument sign, as well as just figuring out the front facade and how it all kind of works together. Those were the comments that we shared, and that the monument sign should probably be a shared sign instead of one tenant.
I just want to make sure that was, it didn't note it in any of the meeting minutes that we had that discussions regarding the sign. So that's just, I just want to make sure that was documented, I guess, somehow.
If you'd like, we could definitely add those to the meeting minutes to make it more clear for the record.
That'd be great, just so. Sorry for the confusion.
So do we need to make a motion to amend the minutes that we previously approved to add these comments? I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
first and a second. Roll call.
Commissioner Esty,
Aye.
Commissioner Westman, Commissioner Wilk,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jensen,
Aye.
and Chair Christensen.
Aye. Okay, moving on to item B. Do we want to do a full staff report? Or,
Mr. Jensen, would you like a full staff report on 210 Fanmar, or is it?
So again,
application?
when I was talking about item B, I was talking about item B on the meeting minutes. So
oh,
it was not pulling the item off consent directly for Fanmar. So
understood.
that's why I was saying item B was just on the meeting minutes. I apologize.
Understood. Come on back, Minister.
Yeah, you
Too
can
many
do-
A's and
Do your motion.
Do we have a motion to approve item B on the consent calendar? Or would anybody like to pull item B on the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve 210 Fanmar Way with the staff conditions and findings for approval.
Okay,
I'll second that.
all right, first and a second.
Commissioner Esty,
Aye.
Commissioner Westman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jensen.
Aye.
And Chair Christensen.
Aye. Okay, moving on. All right.
Sorry. I was talking B and wasn't the right B, I guess.
All right, so moving on to item 6, public hearings. Public hearings are intended to provide an opportunity for public discussion of each item listed as a public hearing. The following procedure is as follows: 1, staff presentation; 2, planning commission questions; 3, public comment; 4, planning commission deliberation; and 5, decision. The first item is 602 El Salto Drive. Item A, project description is a design permit for first and second story additions to an existing 2-story single-family residence, including an attached accessory dwelling unit. Do you have a staff presentation?
Chair Christensen, before we start, I noticed more people came in the room, and I just wanted to clarify that the agenda sequence has changed tonight, so that we'll be looking at 602 El Salto Drive first. Second, we'll be looking at the zoning code updates, and then we'll move on to 115 San Jose. But I just wanted to make sure everyone in the audience was aware of the change. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item A.
Thank you, Chair Christensen, and good evening, Commissioners. So we actually put this item on the regular schedule just to discuss the generator that's being proposed and to see if the Planning Commission had second thoughts about that. So I'm just going to jump into that immediately and we can go from there. Otherwise, this would have been on the consent calendar. So this is a ADU permit, design permit, and coastal development permit not to construct, but to heavily modify an existing single-family dwelling. It includes first and second story additions, an attached ADU in the rear yard. The resulting project would have a 2,235 square foot primary dwelling, as well as a 788 square foot accessory dwelling unit. That dwelling unit is subject to the guaranteed allowance. So even though this project has a far in excess of the zone threshold, it is permissible under state and city ADU codes. So the item that we wanted to discuss was the proposed emergency generator. Up here I have the supplemental code standards relating to generators in bold. I have the standards that are most relevant to this discussion. They're already pretty regimented, as this was intended to be something that functions on a ministerial or administrative basis. Typically, as long as a generator would comply with these standards, it would just be a building permit. So again, this is typically a ministerial process, including the allowance for generators to be located in the required rear setback. So again, the generators by code can only be operated for maintenance purposes and testing purposes, as well as for emergency purposes, such as their power's down for whatever reason. There's also limits to when these generators can be run outside of an emergency, and they're pretty strict on the placement, allowed only in the rear yard, and although not really intended, perhaps if there is a substantial side yard, they are allowed in the outside of the side yard setback. I bring that up because there is potentially an option on this lot for that, but the applicant is proposing it in the rear yard. The allowed encroachment of up to 5 feet into the required rear setback is intended to reflect the fact that especially on smaller lots, that it is just not feasible to place a emergency generator that would meet building code requirements for distances from opening or other services and be in the rear yard. That especially in neighborhoods like the Jewel Box, it's just too tight. So that's why we ultimately developed that. Now on a corner lot, there are some similarities there because they typically have very reduced rear yards as we would define them. And that is the case in this project. So this is a photo of the rear half of the project site in orange with the arrow that's pointing to the proposed generator location as well as the proposed enclosure. The rear setback is about 6.5 feet. They are allowed to encroach 5 feet into that required setback, allowing approximately 1.5 feet of setback from the rear lot line. And that is what they're proposing, about 18 inches off of the rear line. It is, a part of that is that it's required for placement in the rear yard, again, and that is, in discussions with staff, they did illustrate why they had proposed it here, combination of rear and side access, as well as a number of new improvements on the rear face there, openings for the ADU. So there really are improvements pretty much, or openings on almost the entirety of the rear wall of the proposed improvement and residence and ADU. And then there's limited space elsewhere, and it also cannot be on the exterior face of the lot. So that's why they're proposing it behind a small fence area. Staff has included and did overall recommend approval on this project, but we did include 2 conditions by default. As you can see up here, they do reflect the code standards relating to the noise levels, as well as the timeframes when they can be utilized. So if Planning Commission did not have concerns, they could approve this application, and these would already be included in the approval. So with that, take any questions the Commission has.
Oh, I might be a little confused. I thought that they're going to put a structure around the generator. Is it going to be like the zombie box that we got the information on, or is it a different kind of structure?
I can let the applicant speak if there's been any changes. We did speak this afternoon, and I was under the impression that they weren't proposing any changes to what was shown in the spec attachments. So it is still a component of the project to have the generator and the enclosure.
Could you go over why? So what you're asking us is to approve or disapprove the setback requirement. That's the only thing that in violation.
If the Planning Commission feels that this is a warranted use of the encroachment provision, then you could go straight to an approval motion. Like I said, that as long as that is interpreted as consistent with our generator codes, then it would be compliant. So it was brought up because this is unusual, especially how close it is to the shared lot line. And as you can see, there's an outline of the adjacent building's footprint. We wanted to bring the attention to the Planning Commission to see what they felt on this.
And also, so you're asking if it's an exception to the setback, and it is. It's a request as an exception to the 10-foot setback.
And so I want to review why we have that setback. The history of that setback is because of neighbors complaining of noise, because that's considered a building and we have building setbacks. I mean, just why is that setback rule there?
My recollection is that when we did the last updates to the code, this is maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we did a revision in which we added standards for generators. And during that time, I think there was concern about noise. And they're prohibited in the side yard setback, but because this is a corner lot, it's essentially a side yard. So during that time, the Planning Commission was concerned about noise, so we only allowed it in the rear yard. And why this one is so unique is because their rear yard is essentially a side yard. But noise was the concern.
So if noise is a concern, I'm just wondering, perhaps it would make more sense to put it in the front yard or some of these more open spaces from a noise standpoint. Again, if the neighbor, if our issue is noise and it's right next to the lot line, and we made a point of creating that municipal code item, like, well, all right, what other options? Well, okay, if you moved it in a different area, the front yard or something that, and that would be unadvisable because of just the unsightliness.
Go ahead.
No, I'm the one, I think, who brought up the generator issue. And I think in this case, and my concern is noise, not unsightliness. And they do have an unusual parcel here because it's this corner lot. So what we would think of as their rear yard is technically by zoning rules, a side yard. So it seems like this is a technicality that staff can't just approve it without bringing it to us because of what the ordinance says. And for me, if they're going to put a structure around it, which, they say they are, and so the noise is going to be mitigated, then I wouldn't have any problem with it. And I think, we could approve the whole project with the exception for the generator to be in the side yard.
Okay, so I'm trying to get an understanding of, why it's there, and if you're saying that the code actually should read, you're allowed to put it near the lot line if there's sufficient noise mitigation, like put a box around it or something like that. Are we setting precedent here saying that, well, as long as you can put it right up against your fence line, right next to your neighbor, as long as you have a box around it? Is that what the precedent we're setting here?
I think we're setting the precedent that as long as they can mitigate the noise, which is what I see as the problem with those kinds of generators, then they should be able to put it here. But in most areas, like my neighborhood, side yards are only 3 feet wide, sometimes 4 feet wide. And so, putting a generator in my neighborhood on someone's side yard is a real issue. And I think that's one of the reasons that they came up with, the zoning code amendment that we have adopted.
Okay.
I have a couple
What
comments
else?
regarding, so what is the decibel rating of the generator without the?
I don't think it actually showed the raw output at the center. It had at a distance.
As it's 50, just looked at it, 61 D, this is a 38 kW generator, is 61 dBA. So sound pressure levels at 61 dB. It's pretty good, actually.
And with the enclosure?
The barrier states that its barrier description is not very good. It says can cut the noise down by 50%, but then in their actual data, they show only about a 30% reduction in noise. It's still pretty good. So you're down to, roughly 50 dB when it's operating, which is not too bad. Ambient, they claim ambient is 43. I don't know around here. When the motorcycles go up and down Park Avenue, it's a lot higher than 43 dB. I tell you. But I think they've done a good job of doing, like, you couldn't really put this generator anywhere else on the property and have a property look good. Or you would need a very long line back to your electric panel. So I think they've done a good job of placing it and trying to, do what they can to mitigate the noise. And presumably it's not on that often.
Mhm.
My other question would be is, has this project wouldn't have been posted or notified to any, or was it noticed?
Yes.
So it was noticed regarding the generator as,
The generator was not specified in the public posting. This isn't a variance or a minor modification, and that's why at the beginning I wanted to clarify that those standards were developed with the intention of being something that staff would utilize on a ministerial level. A building application would come in for an emergency generator. It would be routed to us for a zoning overview, and we'd confirm that they complied with all those generator standards, and if so, just approve it. If it was something they wanted to encroach that rear setback, it it wouldn't explicitly require planning commission approval. It would require them to demonstrate that there is a need to encroach the rear setback for the purpose of keeping that generator in the rear lot.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No? We hear from the applicant or
Good evening, Commissioner, Commissioners. Chair.
if you-
This is Jen, was from my office, and she actually is the one that put the stuff, oh,
if you could speak directly into the microphone, they won't pick it up in the sound room.
is that good enough? Okay.
Thank you.
Jen was the one that put together the specifications for this particular generator, and I think that your analysis is very well put. There is really only one space that works, and it is possible to mitigate the amount of noise, and it's not used for very much. So only time in an emergency or if it's being serviced or some other purpose. But I urge you to vote in favor of this, go along with the rest of it, and glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. We can open up for a public comment. Is there anybody that'd like to speak to this? No? Hearing none. We're going to bring it back to the planning commission for deliberation. If we kind of covered all the points.
Yeah, I would make a motion to approve the project, with the conditions, with generator and the noise attenuation going with it. So I guess I ought to say the whole thing, a design permit for a first and second story addition to an existing single family residence,
Okay.
including the accessory dwelling unit with staff's findings and conditions.
So is there a special condition that you're adding regarding the noise mitigation?
He
The-
indicated those were already in the condition.
I got it.
That's correct.
Okay, we have a motion,
I'll second.
a second. We have a roll call.
Commissioner Estee,
Aye.
Commissioner Westman,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilk,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jensen.
Aye.
And Chair Christensen.
Aye. Okay, pass. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item B is, excuse me, reordered item B, is citywide zoning code update. This- For future amendments to the Capitola Municipal Code Title 17 zoning. Gonna-
Presentation is in the cloud right now. It's just going to take a minute.
Okay. Would we take like a 3-minute recess since they have to do that?
We're taking a 3-minute recess. Just-
some stained glass on the railing. Boy, hasn't gotten around to
I know.
putting that up.
That was a long time. He was the only one.
Yes, see.
I think it worked. Ray's a good
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
one. Thank you. Okay. Is everybody ready to continue? You guys okay? Or do you want to wait a minute?
Sure.
So I don't think we have any local architects in the room anymore, so we'll just start from the beginning with the presentation. Rather than get feedback on our concise. So, from the beginning. Plan A.
Here we-
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Ben Noble. I'm the city's consultant assisting with the zoning code amendments. Okay, so this is a continuation of your discussion from last February, where the city is making amendments to the zoning code in order to implement the recently adopted housing element, as well as to make other amendments to the zoning code to address other issues that have come up.
So we will go to item 4 first.
Okay.
Back to Plan B. And so there are a number of programs within the housing element that call for the city to consider amendments to the zoning code or make amendments to the zoning code. Some of these programs require or warrant planning commission discussion before staff prepares the draft amendments. So the purpose of the meeting tonight is to bring to you some of these issues for feedback and direction that we will then use to prepare the amendments to bring back to you at a future meeting. So on the screen are the 4 topics that we have for tonight. And we're going to start with topic number 4. And then once we complete that, receive planning commission feedback, receive public comment, we'll then go to topic number 1, 2, and 3. All right, so topic number 4 that we're starting with tonight is the design permit process. And at the February Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission discussed potential changes to the Development and Design Review Committee process, which in 2022 replaced the prior Architecture and Site Review Committee process. The Planning Commission discussed some of the benefits of the prior process, as well as some of the benefits of the new process, and asked staff to return with some options for how the Planning Commission or how the city could potentially improve the current process that exists now. One of the things that staff did was reached out to local architects and designers, applicants of design review projects, to receive feedback on the process today, as well as the prior process. A survey was created, which was shared with a group of local architects and designers. To date, staff has received 1 response to that survey. Some additional responses may come in, and if they do, we'll most definitely share the feedback that we got. And I apologize, there was a mistake in the staff report where it references an attached response. That response wasn't attached, so instead I will summarize what we heard from the 1 response that we did receive. This was from an individual who had experience under the prior Arch and Site process, which included two professional designers, one architect, one landscape architect, as well as city staff. That this individual went through that process, as well as the more recent design review committee process as well. And this individual felt that prior process offered some benefits. Particularly, there was early feedback on the design of the project, which ended up streamlining eventual planning commission review, and some concerns that under the new process, the project would go to the planning commission with some design issues not sufficiently vetted prior to that, which increased the number of meetings before the planning commission. So this person felt that early input from design professionals that was previously provided from the Arc and Site Committee was valuable, and that returning to that kind of thing would provide some benefits. This person did point out that having a reasonable time frame for a early Arc and Site Committee review is very important, and that would be necessary or important to incorporate into a revised process if the city does that. So when thinking about this and reflecting on input, we put together 4 different options that the Planning Commission might consider. The Planning Commission may have some other ideas as well, and there might be some combinations of different ideas here that might end up working out best. The first option is essentially to continue and formalize some of the things that staff is doing now that have recently been implemented to address some of the Planning Commission's comments on the process. So under this option, which we're calling enhanced staff review, city staff would continue to review design permit applications for single-family homes with an early meeting with the applicant and focusing on review of the project for conformance with design review criteria and standards. If staff recommends changes to the project design from this review, that those recommended changes would be communicated to the applicant in writing, and then also communicated to the Planning Commission when it goes before the Planning Commission with information on whether or not the project was modified in any way to respond to staff comments. So this would be a way to make sure that it was very transparent to the Planning Commission what recommendations came from staff and whether or not the project was revised in any way to address those comments. Option 2 involves outside review of projects of concern. So currently, if there is a multifamily project proposed or a non-residential project proposed, the city would utilize city contracted design professional to assist with the design review process. So in this option, if staff feels that there's an issue of concern with the proposed project, that city contracted design professional will be brought into the process to work with the applicant to see if those concerns can be resolved, with that discussion being communicated to the Planning Commission when the application comes before the
So
commission.
the difference would be that this contracted review would now apply to R1 applications or single-family home applications.
On projects of concern as identified.
So
by
desired,
staff.
yeah, okay. And right now, we kind of do it on the multifamily ones, our RM.
Multifamily and commercial.
And so I think another idea that was discussed by the Planning Commission was to make outside review of the design permit application optional for an applicant who is interested in that additional feedback. So that is an idea we have out here as option 3, which could be combined with option 1 or 2 if this is of interest to the commission. And then the last option is returning to a process that's more similar to the prior Arc and Site Committee process, where there would be a committee consisting of city staff as well as 2 design professionals. This would be a city committee that would meet subject to the Brown Act, so there'd be noticing and other requirements that would be necessary in order for those meetings to occur. One possibility is to sort of more clearly define the scope of review of this committee. One of the concerns that was previously expressed by some planning commissioners is that historically there have been times when the Arc and Site Committee had members with a particular sort of architectural preference that might be imposed on an applicant in a way that didn't really reflect underlying city policy. So one way potentially to address that is to sort of limit the scope of the review of the committee, focusing on project conformance with objective standards, issues of concern raised by city staff or the applicant, or higher level site layout and building massing considerations, and not so much on architectural style and exterior materials and colors and things like that being sort of explicitly off the table for discussion. I've seen that in some other cities as a way to focus the design review committee on sort of the most basic issues and less consideration of design details. Okay, so that's the So those are the four options that we have been talking about and presenting to you tonight for your consideration. I understand that there may be design professionals at the meeting tonight to provide additional input, but what we're looking for is a planning commission feedback on whether or not any of these options are your preferred options, or if you have other ideas that you would like us to incorporate in any amendments that we would take back to you.
Are we going to hear from the design professionals before?
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate to open the public hearing on this item and then.
Yeah.
I guess I thought
Go
Derek
ahead.
was gonna stick around, but I guess.
Hi, everybody. My name's Bill Kemp. I'm an architect in Santa Cruz. I was a resident of the city back in the 90s, and I've been working as an architect in Santa Cruz County for almost 30 years. I've always felt that Capitola has more review than any place else in the county, especially for single-family residential. And I've always felt that it kind of hindered the creativity of professionals, and that the city was sticking their nose into design concerns more than any place else I was dealing with in the county. And I felt like Arc and Site, while helpful on some of the issues regarding utilities and drainage and slope issues and stuff like that, where they really kind of started to stick their nose into design issues, really kind of turned me off from doing work in the city. And so of the four options that were just presented, and I did fill out the survey, but I did it today because I was on vacation. So sorry about that. So I have some familiarity with what's going on. And I also was here because I had a project on your consent agenda. But I think option one is what's more prevalent in most jurisdictions, where the architects work with city staff, and the city zoning ordinance is more geared towards objective standards rather than these kind of particular design issues. I mean, I can remember having a project in the early 2000s where I had to come and spend months just trying to get a window placed in a certain way in an addition to a existing home. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. I mean, I have to go through this and try and explain it to your client. And it just really turned me off on the whole process. It's been helpful in some of the commercial stuff. Since 2008, I've pushed my practice more into commercial work and multifamily. But I just think that staff has the knowledge and the expertise to work with the architects and designers, especially on single-family homes, to let them explore their creativity. That's really all.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak to this?
If it's appropriate, I could chime in on a conversation I had with Derek Fennelstein about, his feedback was, Katie, it's a mixed bag. It's 50-50. He's had some really good experiences, and he's also had experiences in which there was almost no design feedback from the architect in the room. So he said over the years, it really has fluctuated, and just said, it's really a 50-50 roll of the dice of whether or not it'll enhance the review process. So that is what he had told me earlier tonight when I told him we'd be talking about this. So
So are we supposed to talk now?
yes.
Do we close the public, do we close the public hearing?
Yeah, so seeing nobody else wanting to come up, we're going to close the public hearing and bring it back to commission deliberations. Who would you like to start, Susan?
Well, I agree with some of Derek's comments. I think a lot of this whole process depends on who's doing it. I personally spent about 20 years dealing with the Arc and Site Committee, and sometimes we had architects and landscape architects who were wonderful, who were very helpful to the applicants in the community, and sometimes we didn't. My recollection is that the real impetus to get rid of the Arc and Site Committee was that the city was asking the architect and landscape architect to be volunteers, and there really wasn't people who were interested in, volunteering that much time to be involved in it. And one of my main concerns is that I think we've somehow fallen down on the public and the neighbors knowing what's going on when a project's being developed. Because we do want to hear from people early in the process. So if there are neighborhood issues or if there are design issues, they can be addressed before someone has spent thousands and thousands of dollars to go through engineering and develop plans. It's better to catch it early in the process. So for me, I think I would go with option 2, which, keeps in place what we have right now. But it does give the staff the opportunity, because sometimes you have an architect, you have an owner, you have someone who is just impossible to work with. I mean, they're very difficult. They've bought plans out of some catalog, and this is what they're going to build regardless of what anyone says. So having a safety valve in there where if we do have a single family home that's particularly difficult, that staff has some option to get some professional help to help them in option number 2. I also think that as part of this, we need to develop a procedure that when we receive an application and the staff has deemed that it's complete, that we put up some sort of notice where the project is going to be. And I think it needs to be a bit larger than a standard green size piece of paper, so that the people around it and the neighbors know in the very early stage that this is going on. So if they have concerns, if they have you know, I think the way it's set up right now, they would not have the opportunity to attend this meeting that staff has with the applicant. Is that correct? It's a closed meeting, so they would, but, you know, perhaps, you know, make it possible that they can at least attend or submit comments in writing. So the issues that are going to come up early. That's my goal in this. And, you know, I don't think we need to individually design every single family house that comes into Capitola. And I think there's room for lots of flexibility. But I want a process that works well for the applicant and also works well for the community. Because, you know, more and more you hear, well, I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't know that was going on, kind of thing, and that would eliminate some of them. So those are my starting comments.
So can I ask a question about, so, hey, trying to parrot this back. So what you're saying is that when we have the staff review, which is obviously before it comes to this committee, that you would post to the neighborhood and at that time, so they could attend or at least make comments to the staff. So what would be the timing of that? Does that occur months before the actual, where we post it now?
Yes.
There are other communities that do that. City of Berkeley will require a posting of submitted application. For example, if you've been there, you might have seen those really large yellow signs. And there are other communities,
Commission does.
and there are other communities that have, you know, notice of pending application once the
Right.
application is deemed complete, for example. So there are examples out there, that sort of thing.
That was something that I thought would be really, I mean, the relevance of noticing, or just the Park and Site Committee seemed to address community concerns, not, I mean, the applicant process is important, but just having that time period to reflect on each project and then having the community be able to, you know, have the, you know, on their morning walks, they see, you know, pending application, laminated sheet like the city of Santa Cruz or the county of Santa Cruz does. It just seems to be a good idea. Because how many times have we heard we didn't get the notice, you know, and it just seems like, well, it was posted on the site in two separate places.
So my question to you, Chair Christensen, would be, as an architect, would you be in favor of an option 4 where we have an external professional landscape architect and professional building architect review your work, or do you tend to lean towards what was Mr. Kemp?
I've experienced both ways. So when I first started working with the city, we had went through the Arc and Site Committee for all design applications, and it was a great experience. We went, I think it was Frank Fanton that headed that committee at the time, and it was, I mean, I really enjoyed having all of his descriptions, and then Public Works would join in, and everybody put in their 2 cents. And that was included in our staff report. So coming into the Planning Commission meeting, there was a lot of explanation as to where we started, where we went, and how we solved a couple problems that were presented at a more granular level that wouldn't necessarily, or could maybe be skipped over during Planning Commission. I thought that was a good application of a small committee, but like Derek Van Alstyne, what Katie was saying, is that sometimes, you know, it was a mixed bag of maybe you didn't get that feedback at that time, and it was maybe a prolonged experience that wasn't as, but I think there's a way to do it that would eliminate that 50-50 bag. And we could have a really efficient, nice system that would give you a summary that as a non-professional, as somebody that doesn't participate in architecture as a profession, you would have that really laid out for you. And, you know, as a planning commissioner.
Sounds like then if you went with option two, which is the staff has the option to bring it in, if it's just, pretty, almost a consent item, you say, okay, maybe we don't need our consent review, but if you have something that the staff is concerned about, per,
Mm.
what Commissioner Westman was talking about, someone gets a catalog thing or whatever, then,
Who determines that? That's kind of the thing about what determines if it's problematic or not.
staff.
Right, but I mean, if there's an architect preparing a staff report, preparing a schematic design set for planning commission, that's great. Like every set that Mr. Kemp could produce would probably be wonderful, very complete. But somebody that necessarily doesn't, they want to produce, that, they want to build their own home, it could not be as complete, which we've seen in the past, where it's just kind of a hand-drawn schematic set, and that doesn't seem like a ready and complete application.
The elephant in the room for me is if you go to option 4, is the city prepared to pay to have those professionals there? Because it really, there were times when it was impossible to find someone who was good, who was willing to volunteer their time to do it. And, my question would also be like an option 2, if we go that route and we decide that we need a professional, who's paying for that? Is the city going to pay for it, or are we adding an additional expense to the applicant?
So I think that would go back to the applicant. I don't think that could come out of our general fund. It would be a cost that would go back to the applicant. So if we were to send it out for a special third-party review or have on-call Arc and Site committee members, then that were paid, that would definitely come out of application fees. So the design permit would become more
So
expensive.
does that become open-ended? That does become open-ended, right? So the applicant has no clue what they're gonna pay for a fee when they submit their plans. Because you could have an architect come in and that architect might say, well, it's gonna take me 10 hours to review this stuff. I'm gonna charge you $350 an hour, bingo, another $3,000 to my fee.
We could set it up that we have a contract with an architectural firm or with the professionals and know that cost ahead of time, so there's no surprises.
We already do this.
And it's,
Commercial, right? I mean,
yeah, for commercial, we do this, and that is depending on the project. So when we have a really large project, we'll get a fee, we'll get an estimated cost from a design professional, and then we'll go through the process with a contract. This, if we were to require this of every design permit that goes to planning commission, then we would definitely add the fee for a design permit would go up to reflect that additional cost of that meeting.
Could it be just a stipend based on the 30 minutes that is the like kind of how planning commission works, where, you don't necessarily pay them prevailing wage, you're paying them like a stipend for, services rendered for that package of monthly. I'm just hypothetically speaking.
Yeah, I think if it's a Brown Act meeting and it's an architectural site review committee, it would be similar to planning commission or city council in that respect of the pay. I think, and if we were to go that route, we'd want to be clear about, do we still want to utilize a contract service for the larger projects?
Just a personal experience, I've been through the process. It's been 10 years. I thought it was great. It was very beneficial going through it personally, of having a third, having the committee provide feedback. I also think, for sitting as commissioner for the last, coming up a year and a half, we have issues that come to us. And I feel awkward in some of the positions that we're talking about, window locations and stuff like that. And if we start to make decisions that a window can't be in a certain location, the cost at that time for that window change could be a ton if it had to go back to structural. So I think it'd be a positive to have this. I think the suggestion or option number 4 takes it a little bit too far. I think option 2, I am in favor of. I would like to see what my other commissioners thought about, maybe any new residential project, it seems like everybody comes here to anytime there is a new project, there's lots of concerns about the aesthetic value and all the stuff. And I think a lot of those things can be worked through at a different level. I think it'd be beneficial as a commissioner too, to have a report that was generated from that review that was done. And so we had some background and some input, maybe at that time, we could expand on why, we like to see pitch roofs in Capitola or not. And there's some feedback and give and take. And so I'd be more in favor of like option 2 with giving staff some flexibility on smaller reviews and stuff like that. But on a new project, a new residential project, that it would go through that. And I would think an applicant going through the process of building a brand new home, this would not be detrimental to their project. And especially if the fees were established up front on what that review process would look like for a new residential project. And I am in favor of some sort of posting of a sign as soon as possible, wherever that would be. So if there was agreement to go to some architectural review, that's when the sign would be posted, and that sign would stay up through the process all the way to planning. And so that would help alleviate those concerns.
So you're proposing a modified option 2 where the criteria for having that extra review is predetermined?
On a new residential, brand new up construction.
So El Salto, the thing we just looked at, would that require this review or not?
No,
That because
it's because the existing house and staff, I would think the staff could have a review, but a new house like the one at Famwar that we just looked at, when it's complete knockdown in a brand new house, that it would go through that process. And I think an applicant would be, they're in the mindset there.
know what they're getting into when they started.
And if it was upfront and everything like that, I mean, let's face it, they're knocking over a house going through the whole process. That's what my thoughts were.
I think I agree with everything that Susan said, and I think
My gosh,
that
meeting's over.
I don't mean to cause you to faint. And with regards to your issue, I think that could be just part of what staff has in the back of their mind. Like, for example, if someone comes up with just a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, here's my design. They say, well, I'm sorry, this has to go through a review. And similar, if it's a brand new house, they'd say, well, this is pretty big impact to this neighborhood. You're going with a whole different flavor, this or that. I think we need to have, an external review. So I think we can, I think that we can rely on staff to use their best judgment on this kind of thing.
My only comment regarding it would be, what project gets, so somebody's building a new house and it's a little more challenging. I mean, with easements and setbacks, does somebody feel that they're being treated different? They have to go through the process. Or if there's a modification to that, does the applicant have maybe they want to go through the process to have that feedback early? Maybe they might want to volunteer, which is number 3.
Yeah, I don't think we should provide free services to applicants, which would be a free architect review of just because they requested it.
No, I meant number 3, they'd be paying for it. 'Cause they might want to go through the process, because I think if they understood the process and it could be beneficial to them, it could save them a lot of money other than designing their whole house and then getting to.
So you're saying that you have an architect, maybe he's a San Francisco architect, comes in, has this beautiful house, and you're saying, well, wait a minute, this is Capitola. Let's have a local architect, Capitola architect, or someone who knows the city better. I'm willing to pay for that review. Let's do that, and this would be the forum for that.
Right, I mean, I don't even think we need to add that in. I think if someone came in and asked staff to, said we would like to have our project reviewed by, a local professional, and you arrange that, they certainly could do that. I mean, I can't really imagine somebody doing that, but if they wanted to, I think they that wouldn't be a problem.
So taking, I guess more question again back for staff. And the projects that you see come in, how many of these would you see that would be something potentially, if you just take a snapshot of the projects in the last year, how many of these would you think that would go through this process, would you think? Other than
So-
staff feeling confident that, oh, these are in line with how we think and there wouldn't be.
That's a great question. So I think the option 2 is very subjective and we're trying to become more objective, right, within our planning process. So, we've had a couple projects that have come in where we've given quite a bit of design feedback related to the design guidelines that this process would be helpful, but it also kind of puts staff in a predicament of if you have a design professional come in and we were to say, so we're going to take you through this extra step. And we do have really good relationships, I think, with the design community here in Capitola. And so I think I was actually really supportive of where you were going with a new single family home. And it could be something like a new single family home or second story, but having more objective standards so that one, we're not picking on design professionals, and 2, when we get to planning commission, if it's a project you don't like, I would hate to get the question of, well, staff, why wasn't this a concern? Why didn't you send it out? So I do think we have to keep this objective.
So you're saying you would like us to say new homes or remodels that are bigger than 80% of the structure, and I don't know if 80% is the right, or 80% of the structures being.
I think one of the criteria get used a lot in construction is once they cross the threshold of 50%, a lot of times fire sprinklers get automatically kicked into the project because they look at the whole project's changing. So that's one of the percentage numbers I think that is common in the industry at 50%. And so one of the notes I made was like a project over 50% or a new construction project. And I was just concerned about people thought they might be treated different in the process.
Can I add just something really?
Absolutely.
I think, for example, the house, the project across the street, and I'm not trying to pick on this one, but I think it was 417. They had a design feature on their house that it was a mansard roof on the rear side, and that was light, it was explained in the staff report and everything. But I feel like if somebody didn't have any background in why that was there and how this is where I kind of find I'm not trying to sidestep the design professional role. I just feel like the community needs to be spoon-fed sometimes what these design features are and how they could be summarized in a staff report, because the city staff does a great job doing that. But understanding like why that roof is there, it was I think it was a sight line, or I can't remember what the reason why they put the mansard roof, but it was unnecessary in terms of, visual appearance, and it could be omitted. And unless somebody says, I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, it would be built, So I kind of feel like having that type of articulate nature to a staff report is important, and that's why I lean towards having an Arkansite, because then somebody would pick that out and say, I don't know if this is necessary. But then on the other hand, it does prolong the planning experience, and it prolongs the applicant's finances and everything. I mean, they're paying a mortgage, I'm sure, while they're doing the project. So I just feel like, to kind of double back, having the signage on the street, having more community involvement, to then spoon feed them what exactly this design is for single family residential and for 80% or significant project would be useful. Is that kind of clear? Am I skipping over?
So
Oh,
are
sorry.
you stating a threshold of?
Well, what they were
or-
just saying if for any new large project.
I think she's saying she agrees with
Yeah.
having an objective standard, any new single-family residence or a remodel that involves more than, 50% of the structure.
So I disagree with the threshold idea.
That's okay. It's just kind of.
And I think the reason is because now you're automatically putting in it at added expense, automatically putting in more time delay. Not sure what you're gonna get. It could be one of the bad architects, you know, that just says, "Oh, I don't like that particular design." And so we kind of fall back into all the objections of option 4. The reason I liked option 2 was it did give staff some flexibility, but to your point, it also gives you it maybe paint you in a corner, so to speak. So
But I think we agreed we wanted option 2.
until Katie spoke.
No, what Katie said was that she wanted us to come up with an objective standard. So it wasn't a subjective choice that staff had to make. They had some guidelines to base their reasoning on.
Yeah,
Those though, unless we want to create a threshold and
Right, but like, just to go, like, again, to just restate, you know, when a project does hit a 50% threshold, there is a major change in that project. I mean, fire sprinklers, you're completely gutting inside the house to put in a fire sprinkler. You're upgrading water service. That project won't be habitable, I mean, for the time during construction. So it's a whole different project when it hits
all
that.
those items are in the code, right? When you have major redesign, you have to meet all the code items, building items, whatever we have in terms of setbacks and heights and all. I mean, there's a lot of requirements we have to meet, right? And so all of that stuff is very objective as opposed to a subjective Arkansas view.
I just look at it as an opportunity to have review done and especially the community being notified about a project that's going to have substantial impact and having a threshold or a subjective measure of when does that happen. And that's why I think two is the right format. And I think how we can get to a part of when does 2 become not a staff decision, become an automatic, so an applicant knows I'm putting in a fire sprinkler, I'm going to 50%. If that's the number, and it kicks in this. And so it's kind of, I think those are kind of automatic steps. And if it wasn't that, it'd be, you know, new construction item because of the brand new house. That was my comments.
It seems like we need to hear from Paul and then we'll sort of know.
Well, I mean, we have to build an additional 1,300 dwelling units in the next 6 years. So every impediment we throw in front of architects and potential developers and families is going to slow that down. So my experience with the Arkansas Review, which I did twice, once with a San Francisco architect, by the way, was miserable. Because we didn't get any feedback that I considered or the architect considered useful. Now, I think that's what Derek Van Alstine is saying. It depends on who shows up that day and what kind of mood they're in, right? And if they're not getting paid, they're probably not in a very good mood. So, although I do agree with Commissioner Jensen and Westman that we should try to do something for these projects of concern. I'm with you though, Peter. It's like, is it 50%? Is it 80%? How do you how do you make an objective standard to have an objective review? I think we should let our professional staff figure out what needs review or doesn't need review, what's mundane and what's not. And, you know, if it works, if it doesn't work, we can change the process. And we should definitely do the Berkeley City sign thing as early in the process as we can.
Like
So
when it's
one
deemed
comment
complete.
I would have, if we go through where we have a contract, the way I'm understanding it with option 2, the city would enter into some sort of contract with an architect to fill that function and they would be paid for it. So it's different than the old Arkansas where the person was a volunteer. And since there's going to be that contract, there's an opportunity to, get a request for proposal from some architects and interview them and, pick someone who people feel can work with the community and the applicants and the other architects. It's not like at one point, You just had to take anybody who would volunteer because there was no one else. And we would be eliminating that. It's a luck, the draw, who you get in.
We already have a pool of architects to do the commercial and multifamily unit. reviews, right?
We put out an RFQ and we had a few responses and then one dropped out of the pool. So now we've got RRM who does all of our reviews. Yep. So in terms of timing with option 2, another thing, so personally, I think the design review committee option 4 might even be faster, just because it's set up that we meet twice a month. If we were to send projects out for a third-party review, people are busy, and these firms are busy. I think our typical turnaround for the larger commercial projects is like 3 to 5 weeks probably to get comments back from an RRM. So just thinking about that, like once we have a project that complies with all of our development standards, or if they've applied for a variance, we get it on that ARC and site meeting to get the comments from the other departments. So we've been trying to internally improve this process over the last year, knowing it's been a concern. But I think in terms of like review, start to finish, option 4 would almost be the fastest.
Yeah, I was looking at just, 2 would be almost, it would be every project, and I was looking to try to alleviate some projects wouldn't get to that point, so they all had to go to option 4, and so that's all I was trying to streamline. I appreciate you saying if it's just automatically everything go, I was trying to look at streamlining for the applicant, that some wouldn't have to go there, and if there was whatever that number was or standard was, they could just be fast tracked, and then there was a number that it went to, or a new project, you go to that and it's already scheduled and everything else.
Just to clarify, option 4, the focus design committee is with staff, the outside local architect or somebody, and that happens at one time before planning commission. That, just to clarify,
For option 2,
for option 4.
option 4 would be included within the normal design review committee that we currently have.
Okay. So that you're saying that would be the most expeditious.
That would, because it's every 2 weeks.
Everybody's in the
It's already
same room.
scheduled, and it would just mean that we'd have a couple more committee members, and it would be a Brown Act meeting, so we would have a public notice for it.
Well,
Microphone back on. We just went through the housing element and they say, let's objective standards, objective standards, objective standards. So now we're saying, oh no, but we want to have this ARC and Site Committee, which is going to have an opinion on a mansard roof, or it's like, we can't make objective standards. We're not meeting the spirit of what the state wants us to do. And I know we don't agree with what the state wants to do most of the time, but that's fine. And so, but I take that to heart. It's like, let's, objective standards. And so to me, I'm leaning more towards option 1, where you have an enhanced staff review. They know the code. Here are the standards. Here's what we need to do. And we put them on the spot to say, okay, now based on some criteria, we're going to have a review with architects. It's a slippery slope. It doesn't sound that workable. Having walked through it a little bit.
yeah, now that we've talked about it, you're right. I mean, it seems option 1, what are we trying to fix on option 1? What's the problem we're trying to solve? We're saying option 1 is not working properly.
Just listening in, I'm trying to distill a few themes that I'm hearing, and I'm actually hearing some things that I want to run by you. That one of the most consistent things I think we're hearing, which is maybe a little outside of the design review aspect of it, but we're hearing we'd like to find ways to let the public know a little earlier whether or not that's to see if they want to or have input they want to give into that process or attend a meeting, or just to lessen the sort of shock factor of I found out after something was decided. That seems to be pretty consistent that we're hearing. The other part is, and I think Chair Christensen really gave me this thought, which is we're hearing perhaps more a desire for more design narrative. So not necessarily something that looks at the standards and isn't necessarily something that is prescribed specifically, but something that helps explain why decisions were made in the design, maybe whether it was by a recommendation by staff or simply a necessity by design that the architect designer came up with, like the slope backside roof. And then lastly, and this ties into that other point, which is I think what we're also feeling here, regardless of the incorporation of outside input, is perhaps a desire to see more of our overarching design review criteria transition into more objective review criteria, which is typically when staff has been looking at them, that is the lens that we try to go through, is something that is more objective. Some of those criteria can be more difficult to parse in that way. And perhaps that's another theme that we're hearing. So love to hear what you think about those thoughts.
What's the, just at option 4, if it went to an applicant, it'd be adding maybe approximately 2 weeks to their time? And would there an additional cost of having a consultant attend that meeting? Right?
So for option 4,
I'm just trying to understand the magnitude of the change.
yeah, the magnitude of the change is that we pretty much draft a short memo to our Arc and Site Committee and its internal staff. So it just highlights, it's what you see in your staff report in terms of the development criteria, setbacks, height, and those things. So we'd be having to get that out in advance to design professionals. Like as soon as an application comes in, we circulate it through the other departments. We wouldn't send it to the design professional until we knew it complied with code. So it's adding that little bit of time of, we've got to draft that memo to do the analysis on it, make sure it complies, and then we would send it off to the design professional.
So what we're here tonight to do is to give you direction, because you're going to go back and write up an ordinance that's going to come back to us to review on this topic, right?
Yes.
So it seems like I think that John did have some good points. One of our main concerns is the public and how the public's informed, so people in the neighborhood know what's going on and can participate in that process. So that can happen no matter what option we pick. And if we stick with option 1, the enhanced staff review, but add the sort of noticing piece in there, that would give us an opportunity to see if that would be enough to sort of get to where we want to be. And maybe just to be on the safe side, you could, give some thoughts to, I just, it seems like we need to come to a consensus about where we want to go, because we're really just giving direction.
I think Sean's third point too, which hit on Commissioner Estes' point of like, what are we really trying to change about the process? And we could look at our design review criteria and try to make them more objective. I think that's something that we list within our housing elements. We need to relook at that anyway, but that could make the process better, and trying to utilize a vocabulary within that design review criteria that really speaks to the architects and they understand what's expected. The single family home and a single family development in Capitola, that type of, right? Like the social front yard, the thing, all the ideas we've talked about in the past of being environmentally friendly and privacy, but maybe elaborating more on those items so there's no surprises.
But that would give them some direction, and it's going to come back to us for another whole hearing.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think that the objective standards we have now are significantly better than what we had 10 years ago. I
Mhm.
mean, it's a lot easier to understand what you've got to do now.
Mhm.
You're going in to design a new single-family home.
Yeah.
So if you could enhance it, I'd be all for that. I'm not sure exactly what more you'd have to do, though, to make it truly like massing. There's no way we're going to get an objective standard for massing.
Right.
Fortunately.
That's actually a great example. That was when that application came in the cathedral-like building. That would, it'd be useful to have somebody comment or have some type of, like the enhanced or maybe a combination between 1 and 4, having some type of representation and a comment subjectively.
The problem
I
is
know, but just,
objective.
but they don't have to, she doesn't, I mean, the applicant didn't have to adhere to those comments. They're subjective, but they have to, they're allowing the public to acknowledge that there was a comment on the massing, just like you brought up. But if you didn't bring that up, it would just kind of go through, you know? I'm just, maybe just,
So, I'm a little out of order here, but I noticed there's an architect at the back of the room that maybe came in
Oh.
late. I don't know if there's,
can we allow,
I know we're past
Can-
public comments,
can-
but
would anybody else like to make a comment from the, I'm looking at you, Dennis Norton.
Not Josh?
Or Bill, I mean, if you'd like to add anything else, all input, it's welcome.
Back in history a little bit, but Arkansas, when, for instance, when Frank was on there, he showed up to meetings, he made comments on the project.
Mhm.
Some of them were taken, some were not.
Mhm.
But that doesn't slow the process down because you're going to have Arkansas already. Don't create another process in this. The people who are taking plans through the process now, you have to be knowledgeable or you're not going to be up here doing it. It's too difficult a process without having some knowledge of the process, number one, and what's needed in the community. So I'd say if anything, go back to the old Arkansas and get an architect to volunteer. You probably can, and just put them on the Arkansas review, and you get your comments at that point. It doesn't hold the applicant at all. And we don't need to create any more levels of government than we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything else to add? Thank you.
Just wrap it up. No, I mean, I agree with Dennis. I mean, we are burdened by process. I mean, this process takes an insane amount of time to get anything done. And if you can get, I think there's a balance. I think you need to have objective standards. I don't think you should review everything. I think you are under so much pressure now to build so much that anything you put as a barrier is going to not get you to your goals, and you're going to wind up with things you really don't want. And I know Capitola sees themselves as special, and I know you guys don't want to hear that. But you do look at things in a different way than everybody else in the county. Okay. So anyway, I think the Arkansas committee can work. I think having it on a 2-week basis and always available, just so things can happen quicker. I think that's one thing, but I really think staff can handle most of it. And if you post it like you're speaking about, which I think is a good idea, and you get that input, oh, the neighbors are all upset about this. I think on that poster, it should actually have a link to a city website that actually can show them where the plants are. So they don't even have to come and bother you. They can just go online. They can see the plans themselves, come up with their own ideas and say, okay, give your comments here. Then if there's a free flow of information back to the architect, they can hear these concerns. But the thing is, last thing, is just that you guys are the decision makers. Everybody, or an inordinate amount of people, actually come before you to get their projects approved. And so you set the standard. And so that standard filters out into the community. People know what they have to do to get through you. So in some ways, I think Arkansas could go away, but that's just my own thought. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you. Appreciate all of the. Anybody else would like to say anything? Nope.
I'd like to mention one other item. I think it has been a great opportunity having a design professional on our planning commission with Courtney. And there's something, we could look at our bylaws for planning commission in general and make sure that we always have at least one design professional who's trained in architecture and planning on the planning commission to assist in that role too. Because just as another idea of another layer of making sure that there's design. Oh, okay. We did that in Park City, but that's a whole nother state. So, okay. And that was extremely helpful to always have a design professional on our plan commission.
Do you have a lot of do we want to go through and
Yeah, let's,
summarize what advice we're giving? Does that sound like a good bookend?
Yeah.
I mean, just like 1 and 3 or 1.
So I think that most of the things we've discussed that everybody agrees on aren't any of the options in terms of noticing and getting more input on where the decisions came from and where the design issues came from. So that I agree with all of those things that Sean mentioned and Susan elaborated on. So that just leaves me back to option 1. Where I am.
Yeah, I agree with Peter. I'm with option 1.
I'm at option 4, but also with the enhancement of having the signage added, as automatically that. So looking at the process, but I just want the qualifier to be a new house, substantiate what the project is. That would have to go through Arc and Site, review would be a new project that'd be a substantial impact to the neighborhood.
Oh, this is a tough one for me, but I think if I have to choose between, 1 and 4, I think I would go with 4.
I think I'm leaning that way. The most expeditious option of everybody in the same room at one time would be most attractive to me too in the process is option 4. But I have to say that it's wonderful working with city staff on projects. So I think that what we're doing right now is great and any enhancement would be welcome. And also bringing in noticing at application completion would be great.
Excellent. To Jerry's point about creating a threshold for single family, I think all projects that require a design review will go to Arkansas. So there's really not a need for a threshold if we go with option 4.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. So we should make a decision. We have 3 more items on the zoning code update. And Ben, how long do you think each item will take? You want to pull up that first, or do you have questions on this, the feedback?
No.
No, okay. Because it is 7:45 and we still have 1 more application.
The presentation can be as short as the planning commission would like. The staff report laid out the thinking. There's maybe a few things in the presentation that weren't in the staff report, but if the planning commission would like a very abbreviated staff presentation for each of these discussion topics, I can certainly do that.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to hear a little discussion on the R1. I mean, I think we agreed at our last meeting on the multifamily, we're willing to raise density levels and that just decide which one, but if you could just sort of go through the R1 stuff one more time, that would, and how SB 9 is going to work. I always get confused.
So discussion topic 1 is focused just on the multifamily RM.
And yeah, the increase in height and,
Yeah.
okay.
So I'll do a very abbreviated presentation, starting with the density question. So here's the zoning map. The multifamily zones are in brown and include 3 subzones, RML, RMM, and RMH. And the density of those is shown on the screen. So RML is 10, RMM is 15, and RMH is 20. And the housing element calls for the city to review that and to consider whether or not that's a constraint on housing production and should be changed, increased. And so in the staff report, there were materials that were showing the built densities in Capitola, some recent Santa Cruz development up to 3 stories, Santa Cruz County development up to 3 stories, and then some prototypes looking at example densities. And I won't repeat that in terms of what the built densities are. And then I won't repeat this, but I will sort of pause here and say that when considering preferred densities, that there are a number of considerations for the Planning Commission, the built densities currently in the R zones, the desired family housing types in Capitola, desired unit size, and thinking about where this development might occur, as well as compatibility with surrounding areas. And this is a slide is a bit of a cheat sheet of these different densities. So when we're talking about 10 dwelling units, up to 10 dwelling units, that's more detached single family home, small lot single family home, or garden style apartments. If you want townhomes or multiple units on smaller lots, we're looking more at 20 dwelling units per acre for that. Once you get into stacked flats, we're looking more at 30 dwelling units per acre, and then with smaller unit sizes, maybe some structured parking for apartments or condos, we're looking more at 40 dwelling units per acre. So, I think what we're looking for tonight, given what the existing densities are, does the Planning Commission have any feedback on whether or not those maximum densities should be increased? So, which subzones and by how much? And then that will then tell us what adjustments, if any, are needed to the development standard so that those maximum densities can be achieved.
So a comment, and this gets into the height requirement, correct?
Yeah, so I think that if you were to allow more density in the RML or RMM, you would probably want to increase the height a little.
And so my only concern was just, it looked like the recommendation is maybe going to from 30 to 35 feet. Is that correct?
Like I said, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying as a, and I just think, just going back to tying design down by having a certain height, I would think that we should look at floor space, so if somebody wanted just to build a building at 35 feet, and so they wanted to go 3 floors at 11 feet and then go with a flat top roof, we could have that. And that's all based off just trying to provide more area space inside that room for who's ever living there. And that would kind of, I think, then discourage uniqueness of design if sometimes we talk about pitch roofs or opportunities of having heights and stuff. So by maxing out the height of the building and then an applicant just want to design for maximum height inside the area and then not worry about what the aesthetics were, I would just be concerned. And I don't know how to address those two things, but those just concern I had on maximum height, or should we look at floor wall heights as maybe more of a determining factor, and then let them be creative on what the design and the outside of the roof could look like.
Yeah, I think I would be in favor of something like we added in the village, where there is some allowance for, you have a height and then you have some allowance to encourage people not to do flat roof buildings. To build a huge wall. Yeah, just to build a huge wall. So, whatever we did, I would like there to be some allowance in there to encourage people. I mean, even if it's 3 stories, to then, have a roof. Doesn't mean they have to, but they have that option if they want to.
Well, like the city of Santa Cruz measures from mid-span.
Right. I think that's
I
what
don't-
we did
Sill
on the
height.
village to change it.
It's like the middle point of the,
On the gable.
you can exceed the height limit with the ridge.
Right. I think TJ came up with some sort of requirement up to sill height or whatever the. I can't remember. I didn't
Top
even
plane or
remember.
something.
But I'm a little confused. So, SB, oh no, I guess it's the ADU requirements, SB 9. Even in R1, we'll end up with 35 EU per acre, right? I mean, so, so that's not even in the multifamily, where the multifamily RML is 10, MM is 15, H is 20. All of those are less than the 35 EU per acre, development units per acre. So I guess they all need to be increased because you pointed out that there's tons of exceptions already. So my concern is, as I was driving around those neighborhoods and those little brown spots are just scattered all throughout to suddenly have 3-story buildings popping up in the middle of this neighborhood, in the middle of that neighborhood. It makes me think that the community, maybe this is one area where we have an community outreach. On the other hand, hands are tied, right? Because we have the housing element, we've agreed to these densities in this area. So to what extent are we driven to go 3 stories versus maybe just, have more forgiveness on parking or more forgiveness on infill or setbacks or whatever? I would think that the neighborhoods where, and there are apartment buildings in these neighborhoods, but they're all, 2 stories and with the exception along the coast, I guess there's a 3-story one. So I would think that those neighbors and those neighborhoods would want to keep that height if they could. But I don't have a good feel to what extent the housing element and our density requirements really drive us to 3 stories and how much forgiveness we have there.
Well, I think you're jumping the gun. The question that's being put in front of us is, do we want to increase the densities from the 10, 15, 20 to something higher?
Right.
Since we have a number of examples already in the community where it's higher, and we have a housing element, which is, if we don't comply, we'll eventually start taking money out of our coffers.
Right.
And, we don't pass that wicket. And then, we have a housing crisis. We have people that can't afford to live, most people can't afford to live in Capitola. And a lot of the people that work here cannot live in Capitola because it's just too expensive. So if we don't entice developers to build stuff that's reasonably affordable, we're gonna just perpetuate this situation. So I think we should, personally, I think we should just double all of these 3 levels, from 10 to 20, 15 to 30, 20 to 40.
I went 20, 40, 60, but again, my concern was that having driven around and like I can just see a developer just dropping there's a couple houses that come up for sale and he decides, oh, I'm going to put a big, and I just hate to go down that path. I mean, it seems to me it should be more planned.
Well, I think for me, I certainly know that the low density needs to go up. I mean, our low density residential zoning it's really low. And so, I mean, if we could sort of take them one at a time. So I absolutely, in the low density could go along with the suggestion to double the density from 10 to 20.
I agree.
It doesn't, by the way, there are multiple variables here. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to increase the height.
Right.
Well,
it's still-
that's my dilemma. That's what I'm trying to struggle
We
with.
Tell him what we think the density ought to be, and then he's gonna come back and say, this is what you have to allow to get that density in that area. You're gonna have to allow buildings to be 35 feet, right?
Yeah, the height is actually the next topic and the development standards. So this is just about density. And so within those 3, the low, medium and high, what would be it might be helpful to go back to the picture of the four densities. And so for low, what I'm hearing is the top right, the max of 20 dwelling units per acre. And then if you like the medium to be at 30 and the max at 40, we can develop standards for that. And I think the 3 stories comes into play with that max at 40.
But with that connected from, not from a density to go to the height, that was just my concern was, at 35 feet, and if there's no design, you could have somebody have 12-foot high ceilings. If we're talking about housing needs of people living here, then we're having massive tall buildings built in our neighborhoods because the developer of that project decided they wanted to have 12-foot high ceilings at 3 different levels. So to trying to control that a little bit, to identify, we understand there's a housing need, housing shortage, and we want to have affordable housing at the same time, but then not affect the overall massing, if you want to call it that, of a neighborhood. That was all my call.
My concern is at the high end. So we have the Balboa project, right? And we've talked about that area and how we really wanted to increase that density. And so in the RM high, it's like, well, okay, maybe we want 4 or 5 stories in these very specific locations, because they're zoned for it. So, I'm thinking the max 40 for the RMH is too low.
So I'll also,
Remember that, like, on the mall and in those places where we're talking about building housing, they're not zoned RMH. It's that we allow housing to be developed in our commercial area. We're just talking with this about ones that are shown on the map as being designated as multifamily.
Yeah, I know. And there's a specific area off a park, right? The Balboa area where we looked at that when we were looking at the housing element and said, well, this is an area where it's already dense. We're already 3 stories. It's like, well, this seems to be an area where if we're going to tear this down in development, let's really, let's get our 1,300 in right in here. And so that if we max it out at 40 DU per acre, that won't get us there.
so the property you're speaking of is 600 Park. And some of the direction we could take from this evening's conversation is that should be rezoned, because we actually kept that out of the housing element. Because at the current zoning that it is at, in going through our evaluation, a developer most likely, if they're trying to make their for profit, will not choose that site, because it already has a profit from the existing homes that are on there. And what Veronica Tam was suggesting is you'd have to put 3 times the amount of density to coop your investment back, but not for a nonprofit. It's different dynamics. So I would love to see a project there that came in with a nonprofit. But that's one site that right now, do you know that the
That
zoning
gets
of that?
into the whole state laws about they have to replace all the low-income units that are there now. And I mean,
All of that.
there's a whole list of things that impact the
Mhm.
financial feasibility of that property compared to a lot of others.
Yes, so under our current housing element, there's a lot more opportunity along the 41st Avenue corridor, up to 50 feet for the incentivized area, 75 feet on the mall. And then this would be just pure residential, not mixed use. This discussion.
Okay, so you're saying that we were to really want to do the high density, like I noticed if you put the map back up there, none of the brown areas are on right on 41st. That's a special zone, right?
Mhm.
Where's 41st on there? Is it?
Red.
The red and the
Yeah.
pink.
So you're saying that's where we have the really high density is in the red zone and the RH. Let's see, where is that? Yeah, I was looking along Park Avenue there.
Yeah, along Park, and then the 2 condos along the water on the other end of Capitola.
Right. And so when I was up looking around Hill Avenue up in the middle of the map there, that's where I was concerned about we didn't want to get, that's going to be too dense. You start putting 3-4 story buildings in that area. That would really, I think, disrupt the neighborhood.
Is there a way to, the mall people came in and asked to, I don't mean to call them the mall people, but they came in and asked for increased height and density. In taking each project case by case, is that an option? Is that kind of bogus to just have, have some discretion? They come in and we have a certain density outlined for that zone and they ask for, no.
We've already given exceptions for the mall property.
Well, I'm just saying if a future project were to come in, is it
They could always ask for
yeah, I guess.
more exceptions.
There's some state density bonus law where they could ask for concessions and waivers if they include affordable housing.
So, so for the medium density, right now it's 15 dwelling units per acre. So if we were to talk about the neighborhood by Hill, behind Gales, is that an area that you could see going up to 20 dwelling units per acre and then if we could go at 20 dwelling units? Oh, it's at 15 right now. So we were just saying for the low density to go up to 20.
Go to 20. So I could go to 25 on the medium density, add 10 more units per acre. And on the high density, add 10 more units.
20, 30. And
So, could you go back, because you showed some examples of where we're taking exception. So aren't there some RMM and RMHs where we're already over 30 and 40?
Plum Avenue, right behind Gales, is 37.6.
So wouldn't we want to at least increase this to cover what's already been built?
I think so.
Talking about density now, not height.
Yes.
I'm talking, yeah, aren't you talking about density, 37?
Dwelling units per acre.
Yeah.
On 501 Plum is 37.6 dwelling units per acre.
And that's RMM?
so we could do two things and we could make the density suggestions. And also there could be a request from the planning commission for like any that are non-conforming to put them in the correct density category, such as the Plum Street, like bumping that up to high density to be in compliance.
I actually think that would be nice for them, for us to do that, because being out of conformance creates some issues for them trying to refinance it, improve it, and do that. So I like the idea of the ones that are existing, that are there, that they get an opportunity for us to give them zoning that puts them in conformance.
Boy, every parcel's going to have its own zone.
Yeah, and we can't spot zone, so we might have some issues there.
So again, so I would think that because we have, well, there it is, the 501 Plum, 37.6. So I would think because we've set that precedent, that we should, at a minimum, just say, okay, that's the new density that we've established, Maybe it's 37.6, for RMM,
Could round down to 35.
whatever. Gotta be, I think we should simplify it and incorporate what we've already approved or someone has approved and just say that's the new standard. It's the new density standard. So all your suggestion of 2040, no, 20, what did you say? 2046, 40,
I was doing
20, 30, 40. Is that what you say?
But that 30 would not be sufficient for Plum.
Yeah, that's why I went 20, 40, 60 initially, but maybe 60 is a little bit aggressive. So, we could say 20, 35, 40, and 35 is close enough to rounding error, but to incorporate the 37.5.
I can agree to that, just going back to, not trying to beat a dead horse, just on the height. If they meet the density, but they have if we're talking about changing the height, then they can build it let's say they meet the density, but they wanted to build it super tall to get the maximum height from a, floor space in each unit. Is there concerns with that? I mean, if they meet the density in that area and you're concerned with how it looks, it fits into the neighborhood at the maximum height, would we look at having a ceiling height or a top plate height at a certain height? If they met the, once they meet the density, I mean, if it was just, let's just call it wasted space inside, they want 12 ceilings instead of 9. Do you have any concerns with that?
Yeah, so the plate height, that's the term I gotta remember. I would think that's a discussion we need to have. Do we, if this is the density, how do they gonna meet it? Or are they gonna, do we have to give them better setback requirements or remove some parking requirements? In order to fill that space, we want to keep it down to 2 stories. And the only way to do that is to have 0 lot line or something. Those are kind of things we need to talk about. But I think, I don't think I have a real strong opinion about where we want to give on that until we should look at it on a case by case basis.
So what I'm hearing so far is there seems to be consensus that increasing density in all subzones by some amount is supported. And it might be as much as doubling it, or it may be even more. That ultimately is contingent upon the height that would be required to achieve that density. So it might be necessary to dig into that a little bit deeper. So to look at, okay, to achieve 60 dwelling units per acre, here are the development standards that would be needed to achieve that. That might not be something that you're comfortable with in certain areas and would cause you to want to decrease that number a little bit. So I'm feeling like if we have good preliminary direction that you're open to an increase in density, perhaps a significant increase, maybe doubling it, and then we can come back to you with the implications of that in terms of the mass and size of those buildings, and then you can decide if that's something that you really want to do.
Right, and everything doesn't have to stay, since we're rezoning stuff, doesn't have to stay zoned what it is right now. I mean, we may look at some areas that are zoned, low density and think that really should be medium density, or medium should be high, or, some of the highs should actually be medium because of where, I think we're willing to look at the whole package to achieve what our ultimate goal is. And that's to provide more housing.
Right. But again, we got multiple variables. We could change the building coverage maximum from 40% to 75%. We
Right.
wouldn't have to worry about height. It'd be all 1-story building.
So I think you're right.
Yeah.
And this sort of dovetails into the third agenda, second agenda or issue for discussion, which is the standards to achieve densities. I think that we'll be looking at the height, we'll be looking at building coverage, potentially increasing that. I think that the front and the side setbacks are probably okay, but we may need to look at the rear setback as well. So you can expect that that's one of the variables that we'll be looking at and coming back to you with more information on.
And we'll definitely build in the plate height in the discussion for more architectural deviations. Just really thinking about the height and making sure there's room for beautiful architecture and not just.
If I may ask, what's the purpose of defining a minimum on the lot area per unit? Why do we care? They want to build a 500 square foot condo. Why don't we let them?
I think we have a
It ties back to your
lot
density.
area per.
It's just a
unit.
calculation. I mean,
Yeah.
It's not a minimum unit size, it's just a different way of expressing the density standard.
okay, so it's
So
just.
that could
that's all you're
come
saying.
out, yeah.
We don't hold people to that. You've got to have it this big.
there's no, there's no minimum unit size
Got it.
in the zoning code.
Thank you.
So I think we can go on to the last of these topics, and I know that we have people in the audience patiently waiting. So this is the topic that's about utilizing the land that's owned by religious institutions for housing. There's a state law, SB 4, that requires the city to allow residential uses on these sites by right if they meet certain requirements. They have to be all affordable. They have to use prevailing wages, and they have to include other labor standards. There's labor requirements as well. And so the two sites are St. Joseph's and Shoreline Community Church, identified in the housing element as being potential for SB 4 development. And so the zoning code needs to clarify what the rules are for these sites, because quite frankly, the state law is not crystal clear on exactly what the rules would be for a residential project on these sites. They're zoned R1, and we think that the zoning code needs to be clear about what the rules are that apply to those sites. And the staff report lays out a couple of different options about specifying that only single-family homes or duplexes are allowed and establishing new standards for those. Option 2 is to make it clear that any housing type is allowed on these sites, including multifamily, even though it's zoned R1, and that those units would be subject to the city's multi-unit residential design standards. And then there's also the opportunity to look at sort of a little finer grain at these individual sites and come up with site-specific standards. So if housing is developed under SB 4 on those sites, there would be sort of rules about building placement and site layout that would be defined within the staff report. So we wanted to take this to the Planning Commission to see if you have any feedback for us about how this issue should be addressed in the zone.
I think they ought to be specific for the site, because those two sites are quite different. And doesn't, I forget what it's called, Shoreline, isn't there already a low-income housing project on that property? Certainly don't think they need to be single family. I think it can be multifamily, but they need to be looked at a little differently, because they're going to be quite different in size of available land.
So there is an existing development on Shoreline.
I just looking at St. Joseph's, and just had a sense that this is an R1, very residential area.
Yeah.
I would at least like option 1 for this area, but if it's site specific, then yeah, look at them individually.
How would you write that into the zoning ordinance?
What we would write in is that, on the St. Joseph's site, they could, the height would be such and such, the density would be such and such.
And we have that kind of thing on in the where the hotel is
Just
supposed
like
to
we
be.
said on the mall, they can go up to
Go.
75 feet, we,
Just seems to need to be contextually incorporated into that. The shoreline seems to be nestled into the knolls, right, or the more of a higher, yeah, a higher height, and then St. Joseph's is more single family neighborhood, especially across from the school. So it just having it be fit in the context, I would feel it would be important to the neighbors, especially.
You wouldn't, on St. Joseph's, you wouldn't allow duplex.
No. I think duplexes, yes, but I'm just saying like not the big, huge, a big, huge multifamily.
So why, so we could use option 1, at least in St. Joseph,
Mhm.
or like multifamily.
Yeah, yeah, because it fits contextually, I feel, in the neighborhood.
It's that one.
Yeah. Mhm.
So we could bring back standards that kind of reflect that direction of St. Joseph's being more like to fit within the R1 and Shoreline to fit within multifamily. Okay.
Sorry, has there been any discussion with New Brighton that they might potentially be looking at housing? I was just wondering, like, we're being sensitive to saying it's R1, but right across the street, they're gonna build housing that would be, 3 stories high. I mean,
We're definitely interested. There's been, I definitely did some reaching out to New Brighton during the housing element update, and there's interest there. There's no funding at this point. But they're doing some changes. I think they're moving their offices to Jade Street Park to that where the preschool is. So they're starting to move things around. We just did the land swap. So I'm kind of hopeful that something might come up. I know a couple, they've talked with a few nonprofits, so we'll see what comes of it.
I just think it's something to pay attention to because, if they do build 4 stories and then we're trying to build only encourage single story across the street. Okay. I just had one thing. I mentioned a couple times it was mentioned here just about the missing middle part of this. And would that be, I mean, obviously not a topic for this evening, but something that we could focus on what that really looks like in the future. And I think there's lots of effort, which is very important for low income housing and everything, but there's the whole missing middle. And it does seem like we have a lot of discussion about what that looks like and, planning ahead and looking at long-term goals for that. We're just talking about the housing, across the street, that New Brighton might be looking at in the future and stuff. And would be a time and a process that we could kind of go through what the missing middle portion would look like on the overall plans when we're looking at this.
That will be considered in the development standards that we bring back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mm. Is there any other items involved in item C?
No, that concludes the zoning code update. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item C. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Here.
Bye,
So,
Peter,
just
thank
be-
you.
I did want to let you know, Sean is going to be taking over the zoning code updates from here on out, so that, thank you, Sean, as well, for the feedback tonight, and yep, so that'll be his project. So as we're moving forward, if you have comments or want to have discussions on zoning code update, feel free to message Sean and he'll be the in-between with Ben and as a new project, so.
Great.
Is that congratulations?
That's a congratulations.
Congratulations.
Guess what, Sean?
Okay, so moving on to item C, formerly item B, is 115 San Jose Avenue. It's proposed amendments to the master conditional use permit for the mixed-use Capitola Mercantile to allow off-site sale of alcoholic beverages and extend hours of operations to 11 p.m. on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, currently 10 p.m. We have a staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair Christensen and Commissioners. I've got a short presentation here for you, but certainly we're looking at the Capitola Mercantile, 115 San Jose Avenue. This is really an anchor property in the Capitola Village on the inland side of Esplanade. Has multiple commercial tenants, residential uses, three different buildings, parking on site, and it's currently operating under a master conditional use permit. The request before you tonight has a few different layers, so just highlight them here on the top of the item. So we're looking at amendments to that master conditional use permit with regard to the hours as noted, and
also to get rid of a condition of approval that currently prohibits off-site sales. And this would be with a retail reach-in refrigerator selling prepackaged beer, wine, seltzer, and kombuchas. There is a new tenant that is proposing to locate into Suite 101 and 103. And then we're looking at signage permitting on the Esplanade frontage. And then there's a design permit, which is really somewhat of a cleanup item for a roofing repair project that was completed, and it was completed without the benefit of permits, but we're using this opportunity to retroactively have the Planning Commission review it because it would have required a design permit. So I mentioned the background of the MCUP being established in 2020. So what that did was allow takeout restaurants and tasting rooms to operate within the building up to a 50% number of tenants with type 41 ABC licenses. And then with regard to this tenant space, 101 specifically, under the new tenant use permit being requested, there was a similar use previously occupied by the space, and that was Little Co's. So just for the benefit of the room, what is a master conditional use permit? It's just a tool that allows a property owner and the city to predetermine allowable uses for a specific multi-tenant property, usually a larger property. And so once established, it allows for easier transition of tenants coming in and out, basically a pre-approval. And so then when tenants turn over, they can come in and out with an administrative permit rather than come back to the Planning Commission each time there's a potential for a use permit. It also allows for some customization of uses on site. And so with this property, there's a shared premises, which all tenants can use. Back a little bit just to lay of the land. On the upper photo, on the left side, this is called the Annex Building. This is part of the Mercantile property. The top is residential, the lower is parking and a small commercial tenant space. And then on the right is the primary building, the Mercantile. And then on the bottom is the frontage we'll be talking about the most. And this is the one on Esplanade. And there's the patio there in front as well, which we'll talk about. So getting into the internals of the building, this is a floor plan, slightly different orientation. And what I've highlighted here is Suite 101, which is the proposed hop shop. And it's a 324 square feet, and it's split by a primary access corridor. And then Suite 103 would be sort of back of house support storage for the operation. And then this is the adjacent shared use space, which is a patio, which would be utilized by the proposal. Giving you a little bit more background on the shared premises. So this goes back to 2020, and the highlighting here is the shared premises. So this is the center corridor within the Mercantile space. And then here is the larger patio adjacent to Suite 101. And then there's a smaller patio out another exit next to the Annex Building. So all of these collectively are listed in the master conditional use permit, have their own subset of conditions of approval that the applicant is proposing to modify. So just diving into those, there's also a need for between staff and coordinating with ABC. These conditions highlighted in yellow are actually generated from staff at ABC to coordinate with the current proposal if approved. And so the first one, actually the first two, is really about controlled space and accountability for patrons that are consuming alcohol on the premises and knowing where which customers they are. So with multiple tenants, we want to identify distinguishable containers. Previously, the condition required them to be different colors. And after discussing with the ABC rep, we actually think the reality is that they'd probably just have logos on the glasses. And so we're removing the color requirement and saying or color. And then number two, and this is just to coincide with the applicant's request of having prepackaged can and bottle sales, is that the customer that was buying one of those for on-site consumption would also be provided with a distinguishable container. Number 3, no proposed change. So this is just about alcohol signage, just because of the mix of uses and notifying customers of when they're leaving the premises and to not allow alcohol into certain areas. Number 4 is with regard to not consuming off property. 5 is just a notification to all operators that there can be consequences if they don't follow conditions. Number 6 requires that they actively monitor if they're using these shared premises. They're not all visible from every location, so there's a need for active monitoring. And then now in the purple, we're getting into the specific request of the applicant. So 7 has to do with the hours. So it's currently 8 to 10. And the request before you is for Thursday through Saturday to extend to 11 p.m. There's no change to condition 8 about audible entertainment. And then condition 9 is requested to be struck. And staff worked with ABC and the police department on this. And we understand that this condition was added to preemptively prohibit off-site consumption, and both agencies are not overly concerned about that. They don't believe that this condition is necessarily preventing open container violations, and the police department specifically thinks that they would patrol that a different way. So neither had an issue with removing that condition. So just to kind of recap, so staff and ABC are recommending a modification to the allowable containers. And the applicant is requesting extension to hours and to allow prepackaged sales for off-site. And this is where I wanted to be clear that once we did the analysis, we looked into the hours of operation specifically and businesses within the area and the zoning and the noise ordinance. And so we're ultimately not supportive of extending the hours. The bars that are in the immediate area that do stay open later than 10 have different licenses, and they also have adequate indoor area. The subject's proposal is really relying quite a bit on an outdoor space, so that's not really a direct comparable. And then the noise ordinance also talks about prohibiting noise within sleeping areas after 10 p.m. Within 200 feet of sleeping areas, that is, and there's a hotel next door and some residential uses within that proximity. And then in the staff report, I discussed that the outdoor, this is not an outdoor dining deck, but that is a relatively recent standard that was determined that hours would be limited to 10 p.m. and this is going to function much in the same way in the same location. So we found it as an appropriate guide to the recommendation, although again, not directly applicable. So staff is not supportive of extending the extra hour. Getting into the tenant use permit. So the mercantile allows 50% of the area that is available to commercial tenants to serve alcohol. So this would bring to 32%. So no issue there. Takeout restaurants and tasting rooms are permitted by the current MCUP. They do have some limits on seats, and they need to have a Type 41 license. They can use the shared premises. And I can confirm that the applicant is actively working with ABC for a Type 41, has done site posting and mailing, and also is working with county health to secure change of ownership for the restaurant permit. So this is the floor plan diagram that we were provided corresponding to suite 101 and 103. So again, 103 is storage, support, back of house space. And then 101 is the really the one at the plan lower here is kitchen area, prep area, sink line. And then at the top, it's point of sale, 2 indoor seats, the merchandise, refrigerators and kegerators. So pretty simple operation. Outdoor patio seating to the left and then access to the mercantile floor on the right. Looking at the sign permit, the linear frontage here, so straight out of the code, you get a half a square foot per linear foot in the mixed use village. So total allowable signage be 25.5 square feet, and window signage is being proposed, and no more than 25% of an individual window can be covered. This request is somewhat simplified to show only 7.5 square feet of signage, and we understand that the owner is working to provide kind of a more comprehensive master sign program for the Mercantile in the coming months. But what's being proposed is compliant with current code, and that's what we're reviewing tonight. And lastly, we have the design permit request. So on the left is the prior awning, and then on the right is showing current condition. So the requirement would be get a building permit for this roofing change, and then the design permit aspect of it is before you this evening. And the last thing that I will do is just talk about some staff recommendations for the master use permit conditions. These are really just operating conditions, good housekeeping items for the most part. So garbage area should be maintained. This is a condition we add for most similar uses. It just wasn't included for the MCUP. And then outdoor lighting to be turned off within half an hour of closing time. So not be left on all night. Food and beverage equipment not stored outside, which is code violation anyway. And then all applicants would obtain health permits as required. On-site restrooms be available to all customers at all times. And then the last one, this is just based on a recent site walk. The interior space of the Mercantile has pretty good signage that notifies customers not to bring alcohol into the arcade spaces, but there are a few entries to arcades that could use some additional signage. So we're recommending that get worked out with a condition. And so we are recommending approval as presented with the findings that you find in the staff report, conditions 6 through 11 that we've added, and the modified shared use space conditions with the exception of the extended hours. And I do believe the applicant and their team are here and would like to make a presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Oh, go on.
Good evening, honorable commissioners. This is really not a change in use of what's been there for the last 3 years. They had the same license. It had food service license and alcohol license. It hasn't been a problem. We're not creating something new here. It's expanded only in that it's allowed to sell beer to take off site. If you bought a 6-pack or a can of beer to take off site, you're allowed to do that. Okay. We agree with all the conditions of approval, with the exception of we think that it should be allowed to stay open till 11. And if you look at the businesses directly across the street, Sandbar and 3 or 4 of them, that's what time they close down. It's the time people close down there. And every one of those businesses along the Esplanade have an outside seating area as well as inside. This is a type of use that's really works in that community down there, particularly on the Esplanade side. The Mercantile has been a problem. I mean, nobody remembers, but it used to be a bowling alley. And it's been changed 3 or 4 times in its uses. And it hasn't survived through anything besides putting it to a gaming business in there. And then the few that are spaced over on the San Jose Avenue have been able to. So it's difficult to find tenants that work in this thing. And it is important, even though that outside area that's outside of this restaurant is really considered a common area. It is not exclusive use to this restaurant. It can be used by any one of the businesses that are in that area. But yes, will they be using that? People go to Capitola, and we all know this. We want to sit outside. You know, it's a natural place for us to be on a beach type of climate. But I'm repeat. We agree with all the condition approval, but we think we should have a consideration for 11 o'clock closing, just as a number of the businesses along the Esplanade do. It's the same time they do, and I'm looking forward to this business. Actually, it's going to be a good business in the Mercantile, and it helps someday maybe draw some use to it. It's a difficult building also to draw people into, and a couple of the signs that are shown on that end of the building, there were open signs, is showing that to them, because it's not just them that's open. the building is open to the inside too. Even though they have earlier closing hours. I think the Italian restaurant and closes later, if I'm not mistaken. But other than that, everyone else in that building is closed down by that time. But it's a good use for the village. It's what people go there to do. And it brings people and money to our city. It's a good business. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Before, can I ask a question?
Yeah, no,
Excuse me, what was the, just maybe you are always able to provide us a historical, perspective. When it received its original, alcohol license, what was the vision of at that time that the Mercantile was going to be? I was just trying to understand the history of like, with now with the arcade there, and now obviously that's newer, but how things have changed. What was the overall vision in just history, if you could summarize?
Well, if you went back maybe 10 or 15 years, there was almost not like small business clothing stores in there. But it was, for some reason, it's kind of off the path of walking through the village. That was real hard to get people to come in through the doors. And so they didn't stay there to survive. Now there is a coffee shop inside there. Okay. And then we have the businesses on the taffy shop and the Italian restaurant. And the Italian restaurant has permission to use the interior of that mall and that common area for seating too. When they get full, they use that inside. So it stays open as long as the restaurant does. And I have with me is Evan Jocks, he is the owner of this business, and he's here to answer any questions. And also the manager of the Mercantile here is also, so they can answer the business end of this better than I can. If you'd like to speak to them, they're here to hear you.
thank you. Did you have another?
Thank you.
I just had questions.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions for staff? Or, right.
I think there's some additional.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. I'm Evan Jakes. I'm the owner of Barrel and Hops, going to be called the Hop Shop in Capitola. Looking forward to doing business here. Thank you, Brian. I think you did a great job kind of summing up what we're doing. I had just kind of a couple things I wanted to sum up. For us, the biggest thing was removing that condition number 9 of prohibiting off-premise sales. I just want to be clear, we're not like a liquor store. We're not doing some sort of cheap type of product. We're basically a craft beer tap room and tasting room. That's our primary core business. So we partner with over 100 different breweries, mostly in California. They're some of the best. We try very, very hard to bring in the best product we can find. A lot of it's local, Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey. But as far as Sacramento, San Diego, all over the place. A big chunk of our business is off-premise sales, at least 15%. So before I signed a lease, I reached out to the city to ask them about that provision in the use permit and was basically not assured, but given enough confidence that it shouldn't be a problem for us to do business here and remove that condition. Otherwise, I would not have signed a lease and I would not be doing business in Capitola. So that's a pretty big deal for me. And then I had just 2 kind of comments / questions I wanted to bring up about the signage, just for my own clarification, because we've gone back and forth just a little bit, Brian, on there were some comments about in the window, you can use 25% of the window for signage. Does it need to be on the interior or is it okay on the exterior of the window?
So the code for window signage does say it needs to be affixed to the inside.
Okay. Right. And then my second comment or question was we were recently told to remove exterior lights on the patio. Before I moved in, the patio had market LED lights, string lights over the patio, which I guess were not in compliance with the city code. Obviously, for the convenience of our guests, for the safety of our staff, and for the ability of our staff to do their job, especially in respect with restrictions set by ABC that we need to monitor the patio, that shared use area. We need lighting on that patio. So I just want to put that in front of the council as long as we're discussing this area, that we do need to have some sort of lighting. And I would propose that we put back the lights that have been there for several years. I'm not sure how many years. I just came in here recently. That's my only comments. Does the council have any questions for me?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Doug. Full Wine Bar. My wife would be here tonight too, but she's running the show. Keep this real quick. So, again, my name is Doug with Capitola Wine Bar. We're the other tenant on the other side, right next to Caruso, right? So in 2017, we agreed to purchase the remaining assets of what was known as Capitola or Cava in the Mercantile. We had access to the mop sink that is required by the health department. When the MCUP of 2020 ensued, Capitola Wine Bar was shuttered, was not made aware of the proposed changes to the facility. We lost the access to our required mop sink and restroom upon reopening after COVID. We were not informed by the holder of the master use permit of any changes in 2020 or now. And you'll see on your sheet, I made some notes that that's required. This change in the bathroom and sink access has been damaging and costly to our business. The modification is detrimental to public health and safety and detrimental to our business. In peak times, the restaurants and bars do not have access to a mop sink to clean spills. This is not safe. In addition, it creates the loss in sales when a business must close their doors, like the taffy shop has to do right now, to go wait in a bathroom line. When a cook has to go, like at Caruso, and he has 15 orders in front of him, they do not have time to wait in a long bathroom line. Meanwhile, the real public restroom at the beach is vacant. This is not reasonable or healthy for our employees. Melissa from Caruso's wanted me to add she has suffered 2 UTI infections because of not being able to use the restroom. Because of this change, we now incur the costs of maintaining a public restroom, which is only increasing costs in our lease. Property management company for the Mercantile, which is in Portland, was not made clearly aware of this change in our bathroom use when it occurred in 2020. It has become apparent that it was damaging kitchen condition to require. And now we have an opportunity here to fix that. Please return one of the 2 bathrooms, with one with the mop sink, back to private use like it was before pandemic. It is a health and safety issue. As for the hours, currently Capitola Wine Bar, our latest hours are 10 p.m. inside, 9 p.m. outside. Before the pandemic, our hours were as late as 11. Then we may wish to return our hours to 11. That was before COVID. It seems quite equitable and necessary that the hours again align with the arcade, bathroom access, and the other businesses like my new neighbor, the Hop Shop. Currently, inebriated persons are permitted to loiter in the arcade. This is a growing problem that is not good for the village or our business and should no longer be permitted by the property owner and highlighted as a condition of use by the arcade. You'll see on your notes, number 6 actually is that condition that needs to be enforced. We have a regular homeless person in there with permission. Alcohol in the Mercantile. Capitola Wine Bar, we hold a type 42 license. This specific license that permits on and off-site sales without food. It appears in this MUCP, they want us tenants to change to a type 41. We do not wish to have our license changed as that type holds a different value in the marketplace. We are in compliance with the ABC rules and will continue to sell our permitted items to go. Again, we are uninformed of the intentions of the property owner as we are not informed by the holder of the master use permit of any changes then in 2020 or now. Thank you for your time. We hope you return the mop sink access for our safety and our health, and discuss your hours. And please encourage the property owner not to permit loitering. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to talk? Speak on that? Yep. Questions for staff?
One thing I had written down about enforcement. How does enforcement get handled? I know some of the merchants do a very good job at if you do go to the wine bar and you do want to go to Cruces, they very nicely will walk your glass of wine from one door to the other and to make sure that you just don't walk out the door, whatever, 15 feet. I was wondering, how does the enforcement work on that? Is it just strictly by PD? Is that how the enforcement works for the alcohol part of the thing?
To
For just
Just
alcohol,
currently?
if alcohol's out in the front of this new establishment, how's the enforcement work by PD?
So the servants area and the point of sale and the consumption area are all contiguous, so there's no transition off-site.
Okay, okay.
Also, enforcement is done not only by Capitola PD. First and foremost, it's the business owner has to maintain it, but also ABC does enforcement as well. And the city has we've been receiving grant money to actually like do trial runs of having folks who are not old enough to buy liquor. They will go around our bar establishments throughout Capitola. And so that's also another practice, and that's through grant money that our police department received.
Right, and then, do we know what the hours of the other establishments are in the specifically?
Any of them that are using the shared premises has an hour till 10 PM. So that may be the difference from what you heard in the comment is that they're not using the shared premises.
And then just to confirm, and I know you highlighted, the outdoor dining is set at 10 o'clock, is that correct?
Yeah, because that's part of the shared premises.
Outdoor dining in the
Dining
village-
deck specifically.
Dining deck, sorry.
Have an hour at 10 PM, and we were making the comparison with similar impact
And that's any location of the outdoor dining?
in the village.
Yeah.
That goes for all of them, yeah.
Just, I guess, regarding one of the comments were made about the bathroom facilities, how did, I mean, I don't know how does the city get into enforcement in that? And,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, but, well, I think we didn't start the public.
We started it, but we had never closed it.
So, yeah, closing the public hearing, moving to staff. I thought it was a presentation and then we came back for questions. I apologize.
I apologize.
Please continue, Jerry.
Those are, I was just wondering how that's handled.
So I was a little surprised that there wasn't a condition in the original MCUP from 2020 about bathroom use, because it's pretty typical that we want customers to have access to that during operating hours. So that's why it's one of the recommended conditions. So to be available to customers during any customer service hours.
And that, I do recall back in 2020 when the master conditional use permit was reviewed, that was a discussion point. And I thought it was a condition back then of it might have been, maybe the red line didn't make it into the final permit, but there was a requirement of opening those 2 bathrooms to the public. And the purpose for that was at the time of reviewing the master CUP, there was an issue with the public not being able, like having to go all the way over to the beach bathrooms because there were not enough bathrooms on site for the uses.
And the requirement for the businesses to have bathroom facilities for their employees, is there not one?
Or a mop sink? I don't know.
I was wondering, I mean, it seems like with that comment was very focused on public, having restroom facilities, and then would there be a requirement for established for businesses to having bathroom facilities?
So the overall building has to comply with the health and safety regulations. And as for the individual tenants and whether or not they're required to have bathrooms, I don't think they do have bathrooms. So that wasn't required at the time of those different facilities coming in. So it's a shared bathroom.
So, just so I think there's 2 bathrooms.
There are.
And I think one bathroom is used by the employees and had the mop sink in it. And then there was just one bathroom that was open for the public. And what I'm hearing you say is when they did the master use permit, they changed that both of those bathrooms were going to be public bathrooms, which leaves the employees having to stand in line to use those particular bathrooms. And also, there's no mop sink or anything for them to use to, so we could discuss, I think legally, having, the one public restroom and the one that, are asking for to be a private restroom.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna we're on discussion,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, we're on discussion.
So you know, uh, I could approve this project, but I would have to have a few additional conditions on it. I talked to the people who are the hotel, which is the property next door to this, and they first said that the owner had been out of town for a couple of weeks and the manager was, unaware of this, but noise is real important for that business to be able to continue to operate. And I know it's difficult to operate businesses down in the village. There are a lot of constraints. And I think it's important that we don't bring in a new business that's going to have a significant negative impact on an existing building down there. So I think it's traditional, in the hotels that things are quiet after 10 o'clock. We decided with the outdoor dining decks that it was important to have a 10 o'clock time for those to close. And so, for me to support this project, they would also need to close at 10 o'clock, and particularly because of the impact they have on the hotel, which actually has, room windows and stuff that sort of look down over this patio area. I also think that, the plans that we got for this outdoor area were pretty sketchy, but I think condition number one of approval needs to have added to it, that the plans include the 4 outdoor tables and 16 chairs, or what's going to be there. And if they're going to change that, they need to come in and work with staff and come up with a different plan for doing something different out there, but that's sort of all we have to go on right now. I also think that, we're talking about a master use permit for this entire building. And there are a number of areas where, businesses have put up illegal signs that, and I think that saying prior to occupancy, which would give them some time to deal with them, that the building signage needs to come into conformance, which is what is required. We typically make, anyone coming in for a permit to conform to what they were supposed to do to get a new permit. But this would give them time and they could work on the signage. I think it's important that there's no outdoor amplified music, which may have been in the conditions. I've got to remember, I think the condition says something about, music which can be heard on the sidewalk or beyond their property line. And I think that that's important too, but, I want to make certain that they understand the amplified music and the issues there. If they want to add lights, then, again, they can come in with some sort of plan to add lights, but I don't think it's appropriate for us to add lights tonight since we don't really know exactly what we were talking about. Evidently, there was a problem with the prior lights, so let's not recreate the problem we had. Let's figure out a way to solve that without it being a problem. So for me, we would have to add those conditions to it, to you know, for me to vote for the project.
You go through the amplified music thing because, you walk by the Cork and Fork Wine Bar, which is across the street, and those guys are,
Yeah.
blaring out music all the time.
Good, Mike.
I don't want to treat people necessarily differently.
Right, I don't want to treat people differently. I do think there's special noise requirements because the hotel's there. You know, our ordinance talks about, you know, noise next to residential and sleeping areas. And I don't think that the music that's going on at the Cork and Fork is anything that's gotten a permit for. So, you know, I think that's more of an enforcement issue than.
Are you sure? I mean, do they have a permit for the Cork?
They don't have a permit for amplified music.
Or just for,
I would have to look it up, but I do recall something about within the original conditional use permit and design permit, they applied to have that door that rolls up, and they weren't supposed to have any amplified music. When they have music, that door is supposed to be closed so that you can't.
kind of like the Bay Bar has the same. If they play after a certain time, they're supposed to close their window. I think that was the addition. Yeah.
Yeah. And I understand that as part of the health department's requirements, these front doors going into the mercantile will have to remain closed all the time because since they have food in there, they can't have open doors there. So, but I think that that's a health department requirement.
Just a follow-up question. We heard that every business in there closes, the hours are operation at 10. I thought I heard earlier that it was 11 at one time. Was it changed?
So the condition is about the shared premises. So any use of the shared premises is limited till 10 PM
And it's always been there.
since 2020.
Okay.
Yeah, Caruso's is only open till 8:30.
Mhm.
Italian restaurant.
Yeah, their sign says 8:30. They could be open late.
Would there be any cleanup or any way that we could address the bathroom issue at the same time, or is that just another enforcement?
Yeah, for me, I don't know if we can address I don't know if we have enough information to address the bathroom issue, but, you know, I certainly think it's, it seems like we need to know what's required by the health departments, what's, going on. So, you know, I would say that, you know, we need to look into it and if, you know, prior to occupancy, you know, staff should have information on
Yeah.
whether or not it meets the appropriate requirement.
Well, we got this, we shouldn't be penalizing the hop
Yeah.
guys
For,
for a bathroom that's not,
Right, yeah, so,
we have to split this thing
Yeah.
up.
I was just looking at some follow-up from the city to
Yeah.
address that issue.
Yeah,
I
so
would
just,
agree.
to be clear, I think there was a condition added. I just want to and I don't think it transferred into the final master use permit that was attached to the staff report. So their condition number 14 was added during the master use permit that both bathrooms within the Capitola Mercantile shall be kept open to the public during business hours. That's an existing condition. I do think the health department, in terms of having a sink in order, or an area to do a mop cleaning, that's something we can look into, and get more, just more facts on that, and see if there's a reasonable condition. The one thing is that with opening the hop shop, and people are consuming more beverages, the lines will only get longer. So so for now, what type of condition? Just checking in on the,
I just want to make sure it's compliance or from a follow-up standpoint. I don't like, I think it was mentioned, Paul, I don't think, we would want to connect that back to the new applicant
Yeah.
coming in. And then just a follow-up to lighting, I think from being able to provide and give some assurance of that outdoor lighting can be a possibility, if it was within the standard, what we just allowed in the outdoor dining deck or something like that, would give them some assurance that it wouldn't be something that would be, a lot of labor intensive work to look at. That's-
Yeah, go ahead.
Business is under governorship of alcohol and firearms, number one. Number two is the health department of the county of Santa Cruz will require everything you've asked for. They will require that. They cannot do food service until they get a permit to do that. Includes the mop sink, includes the dish sinks. All those things are part of the listing that he has to solve in that business. And by the way, they were all solved by the prior business, but they will be solved again by this owner, because every time there's a change in ownership, they require these conditions to be fulfilled. So cleanliness, the facilities, those type of issues are all taken care of by your environmental health department. He cannot open a business until, so let's don't put conditions on him to keep him from opening business by things that are under control by a different department. This is, the bathroom issue, I know nothing about what that's about. But if there was a previous condition that there was 2 bathrooms, there is 2 bathrooms now, but I don't know why there's an issue about it. But if there is, and believe me, this is not even 1/10 of the intensity that building used to be under. There's very few people in that building compared to what it was in the past. I don't know why more than 2 bathrooms is necessary. But I think, I hope you concentrate on this business, not on the whole bird building. It's not fair to take him, make him subject to all the concerns about that.
Difference is he's operating under a master use permit, which is the whole building. I mean, it's not an individual business coming in. You're asking to modify the master use permit. So that's why the whole building comes in play. Though I do agree with you, this bathroom issue is a new one, and it's not one for us to solve tonight.
Okay, but hopefully it won't be conditions. This guy's been going through a big process here to get this business back in there that was already there. And his intentions are good. He's a good business for Capitola. We can't discourage businesses to come to Capitola. We got too many vacancies in. Thank you.
Thank you. To be clear, you're going to put in a mop sink. That's, yes.
Okay, well, no, you can't.
Yeah, just if you want to come up. That's okay, good.
So I'm willing to make a motion if we're ready.
So just before we go any further, there's just a couple of things I wanted to touch on that I'm not totally clear on. So I wanted to offer a little more information about the lights. So the current code doesn't allow string lights other than holiday lights or for religious celebrations seasonally. So it's inherently limited in time, which is why there was a requirement to remove the ones that were there. Now we currently have dining decks that allow string lights. So there's inconsistency with the lighting code and that. So
Could we kind of broad brush it and say that since it is an exterior?
I think I have a solution for that.
Would you like to make a motion, Susan?
So
Anything
that's that just wanted to give you the clarity of where that comes from and how it ties in also to the dining deck, but also the music. So currently the condition is to not allow music to be audible from off-site. So that would be the sidewalk. There are speakers that face the patio. So if the commission could give us some tangible direction on maybe volume or hours, that would help us in regulating it.
Mhm.
Hey, well, I think the condition about the music not being audible off-site is pretty standard in a lot of areas. And I think, I think that's probably a good one. And clearly the music they can't use those speakers, beyond 10 o'clock, if that's the time that we come to for limiting it. You know, personally, I would probably be more comfortable if they weren't playing music outside the building into that open space, but as long as it's not, audible beyond their property line, then it's probably not a big deal.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so here is my motion, that we approve it, amending, condition of approval number 1 to say that the plans include 4 outdoor tables with 16 chairs in the public access area. And that's what they're going to have. If they decide later to change that, they'll need to come in and modify that because we don't have a plan for anything different. Prior to issuing, an additional condition would be prior to issuing an occupancy permit, all businesses under the master conditional use permit will bring their signage in conformance to the city's regulations. And another condition is that there will be no outdoor amplified music. And if staff wants, they could add that to the condition about, the music that's there not being discernible beyond the property lines. I would say that the business will close at 10 p.m. and consistent with the other outdoor dining decks and areas and in consideration to the hotel that's next door. I would say that another condition is that they could work on a lighting plan with staff that's consistent with the lighting that's allowed for the outdoor dining decks, which would give them the opportunity to solve that problem and come up with something that conforms to our ordinance. So with those conditions and the conditions that staff listed in their staff report and the I would move approval of this application. Go ahead.
I just had a question. Sorry, wanna go after?
No,
Just regarding the signage, would it be a condition that all the signage in the whole entire building be brought up to the
I
right
think
standard?
there's just been a lot of illegal signs put up, and it's mainly taking down those illegal signs.
Yeah, I just asked maybe if it got amended, so I don't know what the time frame of this applicant opening up his business, and I would hate to see if the owner of other establishments, other business there weren't taking down their signs, that would slow up him opening up his business. And so, could there be a lead time of, over, 6 months, and then that issue has to be brought up with the mercantile owner more so than just the applicant trying to be the person who enforces.
Well, I think we could do something that says that, it would come into conformance, say in 90 days, or this permit will be revoked
And you revoking on the hop shop?
on the hop shop. Dennis is on the line.
Dennis, if you want to speak, come up to the podium. Or no, actually, we're with the most, Dennis, actually, we're closed public hearing. Let's move on.
I've gone by there in the last day or so. Half the signs have come off the building. Okay. And when that sign ordinance was written, in fact, I'm sorry, but I wrote it. But for the master use permit there. And there's certain things in there that should not even be in there. For instance, the Where's Landing, big signs on top. Those aren't signs. That's a definition of the building. And they were included in there when they made the counts of the areas. And so it's never calculated correctly. I agree. There's signs up that are sloppy and need to be fixed. But please don't put a condition on him staying in business by that being corrected. Give us enough time period that we can deal with the owner and get those things off there and get them corrected. And we are going to come in for a new master sign permit. We will come in for a new one on that. But give us enough time to, the guy doesn't want to live in fear of being shut down because the rest of the building is in conformance.
Yeah.
Please, thank you.
Understood. Okay, so let's finish with our motion and what,
We go back to the amplified music clause or condition you're adding.
Right. I just want to say that there's no amplified music on the outdoor deck area.
It's fair.
So I'm not talking about your speakers. I'm talking about amplified music. Live amplified music, bands playing out there,
Oh, okay, 'cause
guitars.
I thought you meant
Okay.
an amplifier, like.
No.
Speakers out near the
Yeah,
sidewalk.
no, the speakers are covered because they can't broadcast music that goes beyond their property lines.
You're saying no live.
I want them to know that they can't have any live amplified music out there.
That's fine.
Mhm.
I had a
Okay.
can I ask a quick question? I apologize. I just wanted to clarify a couple things. Is, would the business be allowed to be open to 11 and the dining deck be closed at 10? Like, to conform with everybody else, the outdoor dining decks? That's what I'm hearing, right?
So
No.
first, I think we have to bring more order into this review. I think this is the time when the planning commission is going through, like, having an internal discussion. So I just want to start there. And so the 11 o'clock requirement within this application, I'll let Brian.
So again, it's the shared premises. So
Right.
the interior spaces don't have a time and hours of operation limit currently.
Okay. But the business itself can still be open till 11 if they are serving within their own.
But they don't have any room to serve in there.
Well,
They have
well,
two
this is
seats.
about him though, right now. So I can't converse. Okay, no more talking.
Yeah, but he only has 2 seats inside.
Gotcha.
It's different than like Zelda's and everybody else. That has a lot of indoor accommodation. I think we should just stick with the 10 o'clock.
I'm interested, I think there's common area inside the center that they're allowed to use. So, they have seating throughout the whole center. So they could, going to, the idea of having it shut down on the outside, they could still run their operation. Right now, they show 2 seats inside. I think they're allowed to have 6, and they could use the common space on the inside. Can they?
The common space on the inside is subject to the same requirements as
Thank you for
the
the clar-
common space in the outside. So it would be limited to the 2 seats within their area.
Right.
And really hard to,
Thank you for clarifying. I was wrong. It just go back to is there another way of enforcement on the signs that staff could come up with? So it's not penalizing just the applicant today that's the code enforcement person not trying for himself to stay in business.
yes, definitely. So another avenue for bringing this into conformance, Brian, I don't know, do you? Yeah, for signs to bring the signs that are out of conformance.
So the way I would see a condition for the signs playing out is we would work with the applicant prior to occupancy. I mean, I think that's what the recommendation is currently. So we would work with them to look at the current code or look at what was previously permitted, and signs that don't have a record or don't comply need to be removed.
Dealing with-
And yeah, and then the other avenue would be to not have a condition or pretty much put a condition on staff to start code enforcement within 2 weeks if there's still violations for other tenant spaces so then it's no longer the applicant's issue, it's more of staff making sure this building comes up into compliance.
It's not going to hold up his business from actually progressing and opening. Like the building signage is not.
Exactly. Yep. It would be just staff pursuing code enforcement on the other tenant spaces if you'd rather us go about it that way.
Could you amend,
I
could you amend?
My motion to say for that staff will, when, I mean,
It actually doesn't even have to be a condition. It can just be direction that's not tied to this permit and we'll follow through.
okay, so we're giving direction to you to do code enforcement on the signs on the building. Okay, so I'll take that condition out since we've given them that direction.
Do we have a motion?
You
Anybody?
go through it again, just sorry.
Gotta find my piece of paper. I put it away. Okay, so, one was, the outside area will have 4 outdoor tables and 16 chairs as they show on their plan. That, there be no, outdoor amplified live music taking place. That the business will close at 10 PM. And that they will work with staff on a lighting plan that's consistent with what's allowed for the outdoor dining decks.
I'm sorry, one, to Commissioner's, Christian's comment, they can, the business can stay open until 11, is that correct? Or is it 10 o'clock? I thought it's 10 o'clock outdoor business,
Oh, it's 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock across for all business.
Shared premises.
It's like Caruso closes at 10 o'clock now. Wine bar.
So
I have to say, I have to ask that nobody speaks from the peanut
So-
gallery. I understand, but we're just,
Uh,
it's like over and above.
we can show a
It's the
As the
shared
size?
premises related to operation of type 41 licenses is limited to 10 PM.
Thank you.
so his operation could stay open till 11 with.
That's what, yeah. That's why, that's what I was getting to. So he could, his business, outdoor dining is at 10, but if he had last 2 people, they moved inside, they can be in his establishment until 11 o'clock.
Well, he can do his offsite sales.
Yeah.
Correct. But that's why I just want to make sure that,
Yeah, I just think for the hotel next door, we have to have some consideration to what,
I would agree with you, Susan. However, I think that all of the deck, like Zelda's entire deck closes at 10 PM. They produce so much noise just on that Esplanade strip. I just feel like penalizing the mercantile just in hours of operation just seems a little, even, I mean, I understand that they're right next to the hotel, but I've stayed in that hotel. All I can hear is Baybar. I don't hear anything beyond.
I
You know.
mean, that's what she talked about when I talked to the manager there, that, noise is a real problem for them. And the Bay Bar is the main one. But they do enforce the Bay Bar to close their doors, when the noise gets,
At 10
too bad.
o'clock, they're gonna be pulling all their business into their functional allowances. Right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
11 o'clock. And then they're allowed
If they only have the business going on indoors and the doors are closed, then that could stay open, but there could be no one on the outside patio having, drinking or doing anything beyond 10 o'clock.
that seems consistent with the rest of the Esplanade rules and operation.
Yeah, I can live with that, but no outside consumption.
if that's your motion, I can second it.
Okay, we have first and a second.
Commissioner Estee,
Aye.
Commissioner Westman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jensen, excuse me.
Aye.
Chair Christensen.
Aye. Thank you. Okay. We're at everything's.
Well,
isn't a discussion though, because it's a public hearing, so everything has to operate on regimen. And I think you could direct your questions to staff if I'm right. I'm not right now, but at a later time.
Not
Yeah.
in this.
And
I can talk with you.
Katie, I just had a question. This meeting not over?
No, we're not. We're still in the meeting. We're moving on.
So,
We made a motion and if you need to if you have questions, if you can talk to staff after the hearing is concluded or tomorrow.
Yeah, we have to move on to the next part of our meeting, and we can definitely work out any details tomorrow.
so are we on commissioners' comments or questions or?
Yeah, so moving on to, well, do you have a question or part of the
I should try and move
discussion?
Let's take a moment for,
If you guys want to, if you have continued conversation, you have to take it outside. Apologize. Thank you. Okay, moving on.
so where are we on the agenda?
We're-
Director's report.
Item 7.
Okay, yeah, I pretty much summarized that earlier. I'm looking forward to bringing back more information on the housing element, hopefully for a final adoption hearings.
So I actually read your housing element. Only people have too much time on their hands to do something like that. And I do have to say, I think staff and your consultant, you guys have done an amazing job putting all of this together. But when I finished it, it reminded me that, you talk about putting burdens on producing more housing, putting burdens on, we just have too many burdens coming down from the state level on a city the size of Capitola. It's like, the city's going to be forced to hire more and more people to comply with all of the new state mandates that are coming out. And I think it's sort of it's a cycle that's not going to work well for all of us. We need to figure out how to simplify things. And what happens in towns like Capitola or Fresno or Modesto are different than what's going to happen in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And if we can't sort of filter things down, we're all going to be in trouble because we're just going to spend all our time processing and writing reports. But you guys did it. It's ridiculous for a town of 10,000 to have to produce a document like that, and the time and money and energy that goes into it, that it could have gone into a lot more worthwhile things for the community and actually probably provided some low income housing. So that's just my gripe.
Regarding the report itself, I read it too. I don't know if you saw my comments. I got confused on the increases in the numbers of available units. It looks like we open up the mall to everything that's in the mall now,
Yes.
all properties.
Yep, for all properties. The likelihood of them all redeveloping in the next 8 years is,
Yeah, I guess that's the question.
but we have opened it up to all properties to the 75-foot height. And I think it makes sense. It's in an area with the metro connection. 75 feet could make a viable project there with commercial. And commercial is really what we're striving to do, commercial and housing on that site. But the overall number of units, especially market rate, has increased significantly because of that request. Unfortunately, we don't have much of a buffer with the new numbers, and that is the one area that concerns me, but not in the housing element, but we do have some other properties in Capitola we could lean on if we ever needed to do a no net loss for development that comes in under our housing element. There's, we talked about 600 Park tonight, that's one. And then also at the entryway of Bay Avenue, there's sites. So we do have more available sites, but because after 2 years, or 2 cycles, if you have the repeat sites on your housing element, then they're subject to just an administrative approval. So we really don't want to put too many sites on there because in 16 years, it's going to be an issue of how many, finding those sites for any sites that haven't been developed if the housing element by state law is the same as it is today. So,
Probably get worse.
yeah.
But
Did you want to talk about anything else with
well,
that site and
I
opening
mean, are
it
they
up?
going to look at the additional space to say, well, that's not feasible to get it developed in 6 years, and therefore they won't allow that? I guess that's my question. They won't allow us to increase the numbers. We went up by, 600-700 units, right, on the
Mhm.
mall property. Well, the whole mall parcel, set of parcels. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, under today's economics, it's feasible, but yeah, the economics of that site will change over time.
right, exactly. Okay, I guess we'll see what they come back with. All they could do is say no.
Right. I don't know if
Said
that's
that
an option. Oh, that is for them. Yes, the state can say no.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And I just have a comment and one question for you. First of all, thanks, Brian, for sending out the links to the last time for all the permits and stuff. That was very helpful. Appreciate that. And then just a question, Katie, and just inquiring about, not to bring up signs, but where we with the signs with like some of the buildings down there along the Esplanade on like Piece of My Heart, Mai Tai, seeing the buildings kind of finish up and wrap up. And I was wondering if there was a summary about that.
Yeah, we have a building permit for Pizza My Heart right now for a sign that is in substantial, it's just a change of face, so it doesn't need to come back to Planning Commission. We've reached out to Mai Tai, they still have a banner up, and we're working with them to motivate them towards putting in a sign, so.
And there would be a time on that? I mean, like, what, they just don't communicate with, they just leave a banner up? I mean, I look at perception, it still looks like the village isn't complete and almost be better if there wasn't something up there than an old banner that's faded out from a year and a half ago.
Yes, so we're in May, the summer is upon us, and our regulations say you can have a banner up for 30 days. We've been pretty sensitive to the fact that they've had to put a huge investment into that building, and we've not gone out on code enforcement. So for right now, we're taking the approach of trying to have them work with us. If we get to the June meeting and we don't have an application, we could give them a courtesy notice at this point and we typically do 14 days, but we could make it longer, say 30 days. To
Sure.
get an application.
I think be sensitive to it, but just like to have an end line, the buildings look great, what they did. I mean, it's, from how it was designed, and I think we had some input and how then it was changed. It would just be nice to just see that finished up.
Yes. Well,
Signs are always a hot button issue, and my thing is, I just think everybody needs to be treated the same on their sign. Make one businesses conform to their sign, then all the businesses need to. And if it's not working, then we need to change our sign ordinance, but just ignoring them is not a good solution.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so we're adjourned. Adjourned to the next regularly scheduled meeting, June 6th, 2024 at 6 p.m.
I can say this, we might want to consider having a study session on the zoning stuff, because it seems like that always takes so long and is so confusing. I mean, I would almost rather just discuss that topic at a separate meeting.